Chapter 10:10. Dearest brought some people to Kainan province to investigate the situation. It'll probably be another 2 days before she returns. She went to see the wolf carcasses? That happened last month. Then something happened in Kainan province? Why didn't you tell me? Qin Guang stood up immediately. Wu Miaowan was taken aback by his sudden outburst. Don't be so anxious. It's not like it's confirmed information or something that hasn't been verified yet. We can't possibly let you, the #1 expert in the world, make a pointless trip, right? Qin Guang sat down again. That's true. So, what exactly happened in Kainan province? It's said that a particularly large pig appeared there. It's a bit similar to the wolves you slaughtered last time. Qin Guang became nervous again. Do you have any video data? Yes. Let me see. Wu Miaowan pounced in front of Qin Guang's computer. Here, verify your bureau chief account and see for yourself. There's something going on outside. I'll go out first. Alright, go ahead. Qin Guang clicked on it and saw that it was indeed a large pig. It was at least twice the size of an ordinary livestock. He frowned. However, from the photo, the pig did not show any signs of mastering elemental power despite its large size. However, Qin Guang did not dare to let his guard down. What if the elemental power in this giant pig was still in its infancy, or it had developed intelligence and learned to hide its strength? As he was thinking about that, Wu Miaowan, who had just gone out, came back with a strange look on her face. Dearest just sent me a video. Take a look at it, sir. Qin Guang took the phone and stared at it. Qin Guang, you're at the station? What a coincidence. I just arrived at Kainan province. Xan Qin was very happy to see Qin Guang all of a sudden. She said cheerfully while holding a large skewer in her hand. Her mouth was full of grease. When Qin Guang saw this, he felt relieved that everything was fine. He asked, Wu Miaowan told me about the giant pig. Let me take a look. Is there any sign of further growth? Unexpectedly, Xan Qin's expression changed abruptly when she heard this. She looked as if she found it difficult to speak. Qin Guang knitted his brows tightly, thinking that something must have happened. Something must have happened, but she just wanted to hide it from him. Don't worry, I'll be right there. Qin Guang was about to get up when Xan Qin hurriedly said, Don't come near me. Qin Guang walked briskly toward the door. Don't let your guard down. I can't fully grasp the strength of the mutated monsters right now. If they're weak, they might be no different from normal livestock, but I won't eliminate the possibility of them surpassing Skin Force martial artists. No? It's not like that. Take a look. On the other side of the video call, Xan Qin was anxious. She shouted and switched the phone to the rear camera, aiming at the other side. Here's the pig. That's all. Xan Qin's crisp voice could be heard. She was talking into the microphone as she quickly approached. What entered Qin Guang's sight was a huge barbecue rack. 7 or 8 people surrounded the barbecue rack, bustling about happily. The barbecue rack was filled to the brim with roasted pig trotters and soy sauce, fat 5 flowers, large ribs, crispy pork ribs. These treasures from the pig were piled up densely. Slightly further away there were 2 or 3 people surrounding a big pot that was emitting smoke. They were probably still stirring the offal of the pig. Among these people, Qin Guang could name most of them. Almost all of them were martial artists employed by the General Directorate of Guangding. There was Taoist Song Song from the plainclothes sect. The old Taoist was stroking his beard while happily fiddling with cumin. However, his mouth was full of sorrow as he muttered, It's a pity that this talented animal has become your meal. Dai Quan pointed at another brawny man. It's all Master Pan's fault. I told him to wait and see, but he rushed up and punched him. Boxing Tyrant Panda, who had been shot in the chest to protect Wu Miaowan, rubbed his head in embarrassment. It wasn't easy for me to recover from my injury and my hands were itching. The giant wolf that the chief dealt with was so powerful. I thought that this pig must not be simple either. I didn't expect this animal to be so weak. A farmer came up from the side. Uncle Pan, I've already said that my pig grew up slowly from a young age. No matter how strong it is, it's still just an ordinary pig. Unlike you, Uncle Pan, you were born a human and your fists are as heavy as a bulldozer. My poor little black. Fellow townsmen, don't be sad. I'll add another 5,000 yuan. A pig for 25,000 yuan. Its life as a pig is worth it. The fellow townsman immediately smiled and did not say anything else. Qin Guang, so you guys just turned that pig into a barbecue festival. Xan Qin switched back to the front camera to face herself. Did you see? When we arrived this morning, sect leader Dai and Master Pan were talking about the giant wolves that you dealt with. Master Pan's heart was itching when he heard that. He saw the pig rush up and punch it. We couldn't even stop it and had to pay 20,000 yuan to settle the fellow townsman down. We thought that since we've already bought the pig, why don't we just barbecue it? We called all the townsmen here and estimated that it would take about 100 people to finish it. Qin Guang sighed. Fine, he had been nervous for nothing. Since the giant pig had grown to this size and could kill Panda in one hit, it obviously had nothing to do with elemental energy. Panda looked up and saw Xian Qin on a video call. Deputy Chief, who are you talking to? Xian Qin pointed the phone at Panda. Chief. Panda blushed and scratched his head. Chief, long time no see. I old Pan have embarrassed you this time. Luckily, I was the one who killed the pigs in our fist faction when I was learning Kung Fu. I'm familiar with the process. Chief, should we bring some fat back for you? Qin Guang hurriedly waved his hand. No need. He chatted briefly with everyone and only ended the video call after a long time. It was obvious that the experts in the headquarters were very excited to see him again and were very respectful of him. Although he had resigned, these martial artists still only recognized him as the chief. Qin Guang's prestige in the headquarters came abruptly. It wasn't because of his virtue and prestige, nor was it because of his meticulous planning. It was rare for him to make a decision himself, but in the end he still fell into someone else's trap. At least in the eyes of the people in the headquarters, the chief's intelligence could not be counted on. But none of this was important because he fully deserved his unrivaled strength. This thing was even more valuable than aged wine, and it would never expire. A true powerhouse did not need to flaunt his martial arts all the time. Everyone knew that he had reached an unreachable height in martial arts. Even if he were to eat the amount of food for 10 people every day and sleep for 20 hours every day, turning himself into a fat man with a big belly for decades, he would still be the unsurpassable strongest martial artist in history. Many martial artists in the Guangdong headquarters were still willing to stay in this special department with a clear conscience. Even if they accidentally killed the livestock of the farmers, they would immediately think of compensation and call their fellow villagers to hold a barbecue. This was the change that Qin Guang had brought to them. They realized that martial artists were actually human. Qin Guang's cultivation in the secular world, and accumulation, were both admirable and enviable. Unknowingly, these inner force martial artists who were originally high and mighty, would subconsciously imitate Qin Guang's lifestyle. So far they seemed to be doing quite well. They were even more ordinary than many of the privileged classes in this country that relied on money and power. Qin Guang himself did not feel this way. After all, he had only gone to the realm in the cup and became the strongest in history. No matter how profound his life experience in the realm of true martial was, no matter how strong his mentality as a powerhouse was, it had mostly dissipated after he successfully broke free from the Sage Emperor's mental state. Hey, I'm really going out now. Wu Miaowan blinked and looked at him. Why don't you take advantage of the time you have to do dual cultivation with me and teach me some skills? Qin Guang quickly sent her away. Go, go, go. Don't mess around. I'm busy. After sending Wu Miaowan away, Qin Guang put down the chair again. All kinds of thoughts popped up in his mind. It was a false alarm again. He had worried for nothing. Although this was a good thing, at least it proved that everything was fine. He could not relax. He rubbed his temples. This kind of anxiety that no one could talk about really made him feel physically and mentally exhausted. If he stretched his head out, he would be stabbed. He could not hide, but he did not know when the disaster would suddenly descend. This feeling was too unpleasant. He gripped the cup and thought to himself, this is really a torturous thing. Why don't you just give me a quick death and settle everything in one go? He took a deep breath and focused his eyes. His mind sank and he entered the world in the cup once again. Many days had passed. Lu Li could not possibly still be clueless, could she? In the end, the moment Qin Guang entered, Lu Li, who was sitting in front of the computer and watching a television series with her legs crossed, suddenly threw a sentence at him. Don't ask me anything. I really don't know. Don't be like this. I'm so anxious that my hair is turning white. Lord Lu Li, please show me the way. Liu Li stood up, flicked her shoulder-length hair that had grown back, and straightened out her bikini feather dress. Why don't you give up? When have I ever lied to you? The world in the cup hasn't appeared for almost 2 months. Although the power of the Holy Grail outside can't be compared to the power of Mount Baylor during the Punishment Realm, it's obvious that this phenomenon is too abnormal. I'm on tenterhooks every day. Qin Guang tried his best to put on a very bitter expression. I see that you're living quite happily, aren't you? You're filming a movie, making money to do a variety show, and recently I've even given you a windfall. You still have the cheek to say that you're on tenterhooks every day? Hearing those words, Qin Guang was shocked and asked, Who leaked the news? How could a small matter like me setting up a subsidiary company reach the ears of a god? Luli turned around and silently pointed at the monitor. She switched to the webpage. It was a bold and black title the size of a palm. Shocking. The king of internet influencers rises quickly, swallowing the two superstars on his left and right. Then she switched to another image. The strongest blockbuster in the history of the entertainment industry. After watching it, 1.3 billion Wuxia people are silent. Qingguang culture, the prehistoric behemoth that appeared out of nowhere. If you don't change, you're not a Wuxia person. Qingguang, he had almost forgotten that Luli was quite trendy and kept up with the times. This kind of explosive news couldn't escape her eyes. Actually, you're not wrong. Your matter has indeed reached the ears of the two god emperors. In the endless heavenly realm, anyone below the god emperor level will be turned into ashes with just a few glances from Lu Ming and me. Isn't that especially good for you? Qingguang nodded. It's quite an honor, but I'm still very concerned about what's happening outside. All right, just let Sister Luli go. Aren't you torturing the gods? Lu Ming, who had been watching the show from the side, finally couldn't help but interrupt. How about I tell you something else? Do you want to know where your money went? Qingguang didn't know why Lu Ming was talking about such a senseless thing. Isn't my money in my pocket or in my bank card? No, I'm talking about the 170 million you earned by driving. Qingguang was puzzled. Didn't Luli forbid him to ask? On the other side, Luli tried to interrupt Lu Ming, but Lu Ming said, Sister Luli, don't be so secretive. In a few days, even if you don't tell him, he'll find out. Didn't he make a fortune recently? It's just 170 million, it's nothing. Qingguang was at a loss. He vaguely felt that something wasn't right. What are you guys talking about? Lu Ming's fruit shook even more violently. I'm saying your money will be completely gone in a few days. But you don't care about this little bit of money, do you? What a scam. Qingguang clutched his chest, rolled his eyes, and collapsed on his back. He didn't expect that before he could figure out the power of the Holy Grail, he would suddenly receive such a grievous news. It wasn't the first time that he had thought about 170 million. Even though he felt that the situation was getting worse and worse, he still held on to that 1 in a million hope. What if Luli was just pretending to be unreliable, and in fact she really could use her divine emperor's mysterious divine sense of foresight to secretly invest in a big project for him? Maybe she was just joking with him. Just like 20 years ago, if you spent 100 million to buy Google's stock, you would be worth more than 10 billion now. Maybe Luli did that? For example, in the past 6 months, the super popular shared bicycles such as the MO bike were very good at cheating people of money. He was a person who had to bend down to pick up a 50-cent note that fell to the ground, but he had taken away 170 million yuan for Luli. This money was not as easy as financing. It was the money he had won after risking his life on the Hong Kong Mid-Mountain racetrack and defeating countless top experts around the world. It's gone just like that. Isn't this stabbing my heart? He lay motionless on the ground. After a long while, he shook his feet and stretched out his fingers to point at the sky. My money. Then he tilted his head and didn't want to move again. He looked as if he had died. Luli and Lu Ming stared at him blankly. Luli said, Don't embarrass me. Money is just a worldly possession. You can earn it again if it's gone. Qingguang raised his head and glared at Luli. That's easy for you to say. You don't even know what this money means to me. Lu Ming was secretly disappointed. Why didn't you melt it? You're melting like last time. What are you going to absorb? On the other hand, Qingguang suddenly stood up straight. His eyes full of fighting spirit, he stared at Luli. Wait, you said there were still a few days left. Tell me what's going on. Can I still be saved? Chapter 10-11. About half an hour later, Qingguang sat in his car again, started the engine, turned the steering wheel, and drove straight to Tongshan City, south of Wujing City. Thinking of Liuli's confession just now, Qingguang felt that he didn't have enough energy to complain. Originally, he at least thought that Liuli had thrown her money into the stock market or funds. Even if the ship sank, at least there would be some shares in her hands. Even if 170 million yuan had been sacrificed, at least there would be a corpse. Even if investing in the stock market was throwing money into the water, at least there would be bubbles. Now he finally knew why Liuli found it difficult to talk about it. Really, it was too shameful. What the dignified emperor financial butler did for the first time was simply a tragedy. She had broken the limit of Qingguang's imagination. If it hadn't happened to him, Qingguang really wouldn't have thought that there would be such a fraud in the world. What she had done might not have been as good as using all her money to book the account of the double color ball. That way she could at least get back some money and win the first prize of 35 million yuan. Maybe the other party also found it unbelievable. How could there be such a fool in the world? While driving, Qin Guang touched his face. I'm so sorry, this fool is me. About an hour and a half later, Qin Guang parked the car in front of a closed gate in the Tangshan Industrial Park. He opened the door and got out of the car. He quietly looked at the gilded nameplate in front of him, which was covered with dust because no one had taken care of it for a long time, as if he was looking at his 170 million yuan. Why are there tears in my eyes? Because I love my money so much. Only God knows my sorrow because I was cheated by God. This is the corpse of my 170 million yuan. Qin Guang held the nameplate and looked at the words on it again. Then he stretched his neck and looked inside. It was desolate and deserted. He let out a long sigh again. Alas! Liuli's voice sounded in his heart. Don't be like this. Money is just a worldly possession. It's not something you can take with you when you're alive. It's fine if it's gone. I didn't cheat you on purpose. At that time, I really thought it was a good deal, so I did it directly. I didn't expect the Earthlings to be so resourceful. Qin Guang didn't want to talk to her. Money was just a worldly possession, but the problem was that he was still alive, but the money was gone. And it wasn't his fault. You were the one who cheated me. How could I not be heartbroken? Tangshan Industrial Park Sewage Treatment Plant? This was the name of the company on Qin Guang's nameplate. About a few months ago, he was immersed in the joy of winning a car race and suddenly making a fortune. At the same time, he was busy doing live broadcasts, participating in the World Championship of Darts, creating Weibo, taking on endorsements, and all sorts of other things. Later, when he wanted to do something with his own money, Lin he had time, she told him, said, and other things said, she said, he was, she, and said. At that time, Qin Guang didn't know that it wasn't a surprise but a shock. Even Qin Guang had no idea how she did it. Without him knowing, she managed to transfer so much money from his Swiss black gold card account. Later on, Qin Guang analyzed that Liuli might have controlled him to sleepwalk to sign the document after he fell into a deep sleep, or she might have used a hypnosis on him. In any case, the money was taken away by her without him knowing. Back then, Qin Guang's live stream was especially profitable, and he had sufficient traffic and advertising fees on Weibo. He was also rather confident in Liuli, so he didn't think too much about it. Later, with Tang Xiaokai's $20 million, Qin Guang brokerage got on the right track, and he didn't need money. If it weren't for his obsession with his hard-earned money, which made him unable to forget the 170 million that Liuli had moved away, he would have forgotten about this matter. Now, he finally knew that Liuli had made a shocking deal in the venture capital market with 170 million. At that time, everyone in the venture capital market was stunned. They all thought that they were seeing things. The damned company, Summer Light Environmental Protection, was bought by someone. What kind of spirit was this? What kind of international humanitarian selflessness was this? It happened so suddenly that even the owner, Mr. Xia, didn't come back to his senses. Already in complete despair, he had only tried to post the company's information online, but he didn't expect it to be sold after only a few days. The other party was so rich that he didn't even show up in person during the whole transaction. Everything was handled by the staff of UBS. Both parties reached an agreement on the price at lightning speed. Mr. Xia originally called for 200 million, but the other party raised the price to 170 million and refused to increase it. Mr. Xia didn't dare to say anything and agreed. Then, it was a series of rapid signing of the contract, stock transaction, and transfer of the money. When 170 million was transferred into his account, Mr. Xia realized that he wasn't dreaming. Everything was real. He was a little puzzled. It wasn't that he hadn't seen nouveau riche investors before, but nouveau riche who didn't show up in person for such a large transaction and left it to an agent was really unprecedented. It wasn't until the contract was signed that he found out the other party's name. It was a little familiar. Qin Guang? Mr. Xia didn't know if this Qin Guang was the famous internet celebrity Qin Guang, but he didn't particularly care about it. It was probably someone with the same name. There were at least tens of thousands of people with this name in the country. Anyway, it didn't matter. The money was in his hands and he was finally free. That was the most important thing. This Summer Light Environmental Protection was the environmental protection company that operated the Tangshan Industrial Park sewage treatment plant using the BOT model. BOT was the abbreviation of Build Operate Transfer, which literally meant Build Operate Transfer. This was the most commonly used model in the construction and operation of sewage treatment plants in China. The model was very simple. The local government would provide the construction land, and Summer Light Environmental Protection would invest in the construction of the Tangshan Industrial Park sewage treatment plant to support the industrial park. After the sewage treatment plant was built, Summer Light Environmental Protection would have the right to operate the plant for 20 years. Every year, they would collect an appropriate fee based on the sewage discharge of other enterprises in the industrial park. After 20 years, Summer Light Environmental Protection would transfer the sewage treatment plant to the local government for free. According to the contract signed 8 years ago, if the sewage treatment plant could operate steadily and orderly for 20 years, Summer Light Environmental Protection would not only be able to smoothly recoup all their investment, but they would also be able to earn more than 300% profit. At that time, Mr. Xia could be said to be full of ambition. He almost sold everything he had and pulled in countless investments, preparing to go all out in the environmental protection industry. But soon the cruel reality hit him in the head. From the second month after the sewage treatment plant was built, it was as if he had fallen into an eternal nightmare. The discharge couldn't meet the standards. Because of the unreasonable selection of enterprises in the industrial park's investment system, the sewage discharge of the entire industrial park was unimaginably complicated and extremely difficult to deal with. For a whole 8 years, Mr. Xia thought of every possible way. From beginning to end, he had made no less than 10 technical modifications, but he still knelt down again and again under all kinds of super difficult sewage. Super high concentration organic matter, super high pH, super hard to degrade macromolecular chains, super high salinity, heavy metal electroplating wastewater, organic extraction of toxic wastewater. In short, the sewage in the entire industrial park, no matter how deceptive it was, there was not a single good one. Poor Mr. Xia, he was tormented for a whole 8 years. In these 8 years he was reported more than 50 times, fined more than 70 times, and more than 10 technical modifications made the construction cost of the sewage treatment plant rise from the original 150 million to 380 million. Every month, after deducting the cost of the sewage treatment fee, it was simply not enough to pay for the fines and technical modifications. He begged Grandpa and Grandma, inviting famous doctors and experts everywhere. It was useless, it was all useless, he just couldn't reach the target. He was scolded as Tangshan City's cancer. He also felt wronged. But this was still not the saddest. After the fines, Tangshan City's local government also couldn't do anything to him. They could only use their last trump card and deduct his number of years. The original authorized operating period of 20 years was deducted to less than 10 years just like that. Mr. Xia felt wronged, but the country had its laws and the family had its rules. He couldn't reach the target, he couldn't blame others. Especially in recent years, China has increasingly paid attention to environmental issues. He was listed as a model in the industry again and again because of committing crimes against the wind. In fact, after about 4 years of stubbornly resisting, he knew the crux of the problem. The original design of the sewage treatment station had a fundamental error. Since the sewage was abnormally complicated, then from the beginning different water quality should have been individually pre-treated, and the process should have been very refined. But to achieve this effect, it was not a little bit of technical modification can be completed, it was equivalent to the entire sewage treatment plant to be completely rebuilt. The cost of this was simply too high for him to bear. He also struggled for a long time, looking everywhere for investment, looking for 4 years but to no avail. Finally this year he completely lost hope. As long as his number of years was deducted again, his operating period would completely come to an end. Tangshan City's government had even contacted the receiving unit in advance, known as the leading domestic water company, Tiansong Water Company. Only a large group like Tiansong Water Company with strong technical strength and good capital operation had the ability to take over this mess. The entire sewage treatment plant would be overturned and rebuilt on the basis of the original site, introducing more advanced technology and returning Tangshan River to a clear spring. This was of course a great thing for Tangshan City, but to Mr. Xia, it meant that all his investments were wasted, plus he had countless debts that he could never pay off. Debts will always be debts even if he went bankrupt. He wouldn't be pursued legally, but emotionally, those creditors wouldn't let him go. At that time, other than cutting his throat and hanging himself, he would have no other choice. Only this way would he not implicate his family. Mr. Xia, who was at his wit's end, had the mentality of breaking a jar, and threw the letter of intent for the transfer of Xiaoguang Environmental Protection into the venture capital market. Of course, he wouldn't mention the terrible situation of Xiaoguang Environmental Protection and the Tangshan Industrial Park sewage treatment plant, only various kinds of beautification, various investments up to 400 million, and now because his children went abroad, he had to retreat to the second line, so he packaged it up and sold it. At first, because of this matter, he was laughed at by many people. You and your company's reputation is so bad, how can you sell it? Chapter 10:12. But he never expected that a sucker would come a few days later. Then there were all kinds of signatures and stamps, as if the other party was afraid that he would go back on his word. After another few days, 170 million in cash was transferred to his account. Boss Xia was so moved that his eyes were brimming with tears, and then he happily took the money to pay off his debts. After so many years of poor management, Xia Guang Environmental Protection owed a lot of debts. Relying on this 170 million, not only did he pay off his debts, but he also left a few million in his pocket. He almost wanted to worship the name Qin Guang like a living bodhisattva. Of course, it was not easy to transfer such a huge entity. The Tangshan city government was also inexplicably surprised by this inconceivable interference. Several parties worked together and spent a whole 2 months to complete the handover procedures. After the handover, Boss Xia wanted to pat his butt and leave, but he and dozens of employees in the sewage treatment station waited for a long time, but Boss Chen did not come. He was also very responsible. Even if it had nothing to do with him, he still stayed in the factory. He took a few technical backbones and ran to Gokyo University to find Professor Xu Lirong, a well-known expert in the country, to ask for help. He also wanted to help the last struggle of all his hard work. Before he knew it, another 2 months had passed. There was less than half a month left before the next national census, and the weir was still yellow with substandard wastewater. He also had no choice. Therefore, 7 days before Qin Guang arrived here, he left the company's general manager the last 500,000 in cash and then quietly left. His last 500,000 was used to pay the general manager the wages of dozens of employees in the factory for nearly 3 months. When Qin Guang arrived, everyone, including the guard, was gathered in the big conference room of the office building, waiting to get the severance pay, and then go home to find their mothers. Qin Guang straightened his clothes and then walked inside with his head held high. No matter what, the money had already been spent here, and there were still 7 days before the next investigation team came to the factory. He had to do something. First of all, the old man, as the new boss, had to show his imposing manner, even if he could only be the boss for another 7 days. On second thought, the construction of Rome only took 7 days. After all, he was the master of the heavenly Holy Grail who had 3,000 worlds. Maybe he could turn something rotten into something magical? Sigh, Lady Lioli, can I interview you? What kind of mentality did you have at that time to be able to cheat me like that? You said you're my father? Are you tired of living? Oh no no no. How can you trick me like this? Don't be angry. I'm not mocking you. I just don't understand. Let's properly sum up our experiences and lessons. Only then can we learn from our mistakes. Dream on. Don't expect me to help you with your finances in the future. I'm relieved to hear that. When you wake up tomorrow morning, Qingguang Group won't be yours anymore. Lady Lazuli, I was wrong. It's good that you know you're wrong. Lioli's slightly smug voice rang out in Qingguang's mind. It was obvious that she was very satisfied with the treatment of not having to repent after doing something wrong, but she was really a little embarrassed. So I forget it. I'll admit it. Back then, I watched some TV series and felt that this kind of thing was very simple. Then, I felt that the stock market was too slow, so I thought about whether I could directly buy a company for you. And then you chose Xiaoguang Environmental Protection? Lioli grunted. The news released by that surname Xia was really tempting. A company with a total investment of more than 400 million. Buying it for 170 million, it's really worth it. Then I thought, anyway, didn't you study environmental protection in school? It's just right for your specialty. Qin Guang's eyes were listless. Yeah, I really thank you for being so considerate. You didn't even know to ask around. A sewage plant that couldn't reach the target for a whole 8 years. Not to say that there won't be anyone like it in the future, but I feel that it's already unprecedented. Also, this plant was originally only worth that price with 20 years of operation rights. Now it's already been a tragedy for 8 years and there's only half a year left. How could it be worth 170 million? I was too excited at that time and didn't investigate carefully. I'm sorry. Without entering the cup world, Qin Guang already knew that Lioli's face must be as red as a monkey's butt. Isn't it written in his contract? Under normal operation, a year's profit can reach 40 to 50 million. I've investigated before. A company that can earn back its capital in 5 years is very powerful. That's all a scam. That's theoretically the most ideal situation that can be achieved. All right. Actually, I also found out later but that Boss Ya had already returned almost all the money. Even if I wanted to collect it, I wouldn't be able to. Lioli was getting more and more embarrassed. I just don't understand. Since I'm the legal representative of the company, why didn't anyone inform me after so long? Actually it's just that you don't know. You just met with the representative of UBS a few days ago. When Lioli said that, Qin Guang immediately understood. God knows how many times he had secretly sleepwalked for Lioli with his divine power over such a long time. He didn't even know how many times he had signed and how many phone calls he had received without knowing it. Qin Guang showed his might again. No wonder I said that your divine power is always insufficient. It seems that you've completely lost in this mess. You can't do anything right but you're good at spoiling things. Lioli's patience finally ran out. Why don't you try saying it again? I gave you some color and you still want to open a dye shop? You want to go to heaven? I've been defeated by you, what do you want? You just said you wouldn't laugh at me. Qin Guang decisively gave up. No, I'm just joking with you. He rubbed his eyes. There was sand in them and his heart felt sour. Having to deal with this kind of god emperor, he was really tired as the protagonist. At least you know what's good for you. Anyway, you still have 7 days. If you can't be saved, it's your fault. It has nothing to do with me. Yes, it's my fault. If you continue to talk nonsense, I'll let your whole family sleep on the streets tomorrow. Madame Lioli is wise, divine, beautiful, and may live for 10,000 years. Qin Guang didn't have any psychological burden when it came to flattering Lioli and making her happy. Even if he wanted to strangle her a second ago, as long as she was angry, Qin Guang could coax her into a treasure in minutes. Even if he knew that she was very deceitful and unreasonable, and even to the extent that in order to cover up her own failure, she wasted her divine power again and again on this kind of deceitful thing. She wanted her face so much that she made him suffer, but her fists were stronger, so she had the final say. Qin Guang felt that he was a civilized person and wouldn't argue with a violent maniac. With these messy thoughts, Qin Guang walked past the sewage treatment plant area. Feeling the rotting smell and depression, he went straight to the mottled walls of the office building. It felt like the wind was blowing and the water was cold. No matter what, I'm here. Wait for me to save you. My 170 million. Although his determination was very firm, his heart was cold. The sewage treatment plant area was too deserted. Not to mention people, not even a sparrow could be seen. It felt like a haunted house. It wasn't until he walked to the entrance of the office building that he faintly heard the sound of argument coming from inside. Chapter 10:13. I don't agree. We've been working here for 8 years. How can we be dismissed just like that? I've been here since the first day the plant was built. How can I leave just because you say so? Manager Guo, you have to give us an explanation. That's right. Even if Tiansong Water takes over the plant, doesn't Tiansong Water still need people? Manager Guo, please help us talk to Tiansong Water. We're all experienced workers. It's better to use us than to hire new people, right? That's right. Our plant will be taken back by the government sooner or later. We're still a state-owned enterprise. They can't just dismiss us like that, can they? Before Qin Guang even took 2 steps inside, he heard a commotion coming from inside. Obviously, these employees of the Tongshan Industrial Park wastewater treatment plant who were about to be liquidated were not willing to be dismissed just like that. To put it nicely, they had feelings for the plant. To put it bluntly, these people had worked in a wastewater treatment plant that had not been up to standard for 8 years. They might have a lot of work experience, but in the eyes of others, it was all experience of substandard operation. Today they were dismissed. It would be difficult for them to find a job in the same industry in the future. Everyone knew Tiansong Water's ability. When Boss Ya was here, the treatment was substandard. However, when the owner changed and the wastewater treatment plant was completely renovated, the plant came back to life and could operate stably. Then, the jobs at the Tongshan Industrial Park wastewater treatment plant would become an iron rice bowl that would never change. However, Qin Guang felt that the employees were overthinking it. The Tiansong Water Works wasn't a small enterprise, but a massive water company that spanned across the country. It had its own mature hiring system, especially for middle-level management and above. It was even more impossible for them to continue using the employees of the Summer Light Environmental Protection, who could be said to be failures among failures. Of course, from a bystander's point of view, Qin Guang could also understand their feelings. But as for whether they could stay or not, it depended on their ability. Just as he was about to hurry inside, he heard a familiar middle-aged man's deep voice. Quiet. Everyone be quiet. Don't be agitated. Listen to me. Regarding everyone's arrangements, Boss Xia had already asked the people from Tiansong. Tiansong also had their own rules. Even if they still wanted to hire us, they would have to wait for the industrial factory to stop working first. Then everyone would come and hire us one by one. What's the use of arguing with me now? Manager Guo, don't try to fool us. I'm afraid you've already discussed it with them, right? That's right. He only cares about himself. He's too selfish. Also, according to the laws and regulations, even if we are to be dismissed, we can't just pay 3 months' salary, we still have to give N+1 severance pay. Manager Guo, ask Xia to come back and give us an explanation. Bang. The sound of someone slamming the table came from inside, and then Manager Guo's voice came again, "Are you done?" After this roar, the conference room finally quieted down. Qin Guang was not in a hurry to go in. He already knew who was inside and was pleasantly surprised. He did not expect to meet an old acquaintance here. Now, he wanted to see how this old acquaintance of his planned to deal with the situation in front of him. After waiting for about 10 seconds, Manager Guo sighed heavily. "Sigh, it's not like you don't know about Boss Xia's situation. He almost lost all his money just to run this factory. Now he finally found a sucker to take the blame. Back then, Boss Xia spent tens of millions of his net worth here. Before he left, he still thought of leaving us $500,000 as compensation. Isn't that very benevolent? Also, don't say that I'm colluding with Tiansong. I want to, but they don't like me. When it's time to rehire, you guys at least have a chance to stay. Guoming will definitely have to pack up and leave. Only I'm so easy to talk to. If it was someone unreasonable, forget about compensating you guys, I would take the money and run. And +1? I don't even have a single cent. Our Xiaoguang environmental protection may look like a transfer, but in fact, it's no different from bankruptcy liquidation. Do you know what bankruptcy liquidation is? Even if you don't pay the money you owe the bank, save your severance pay. Alright, I'll call your names to come up and get the money. Take the money and leave. If you think it's too little and don't want to take it, then fine, I'll just put it in my bag. After being yelled at by Guoming, the people below were much more obedient. Lu Tao, 3 months of compensation, a total of 9,300, count it yourself. Guoming immediately began to count the money. When he took out the money, he sighed again. Sigh, the factory has become like this. Boss Xia has also done his best. Do your best and leave it to fate. Xiaolu, you're a good lad. You're the vanguard of our mechanical repair class. It won't be difficult for you to find a factory after you leave. Xiaolu choked and said, "Thank you, Manager Guo. What are you thanking me for? This money was given by the owner of our factory. If you want to thank someone, thank that sucker." Qin Guang, who was outside the door, covered his heart with his hand. As the sucker himself, he felt an inexplicable sadness. "Alright, Manager Guo, what do you think is going on with our owner? He spent so much money to buy our factory, but in the end he didn't come to take it over. What is he thinking? Is he just going to watch all this money go down the drain? Guoming, who knows? Maybe after he bought our factory he realized that there's nothing he can do. Out of sight, out of mind? Or maybe he's stupid. Maybe? Or maybe he's too rich and doesn't care about this little bit of money? Alright, Xiaolu, after you get the money, get out of the way. There are still so many people behind you. Anyway, a sucker is a sucker. Even if he's regretting it now, it doesn't matter. Even if he's our new boss now, he can only be here for a few days. The people from the inspection team will come next week. You guys can leave easily, but I still have to stay with Worker Yang and the others to guard the last shift. I'm guessing that I'll be scolded badly by others. Manager Guo, I want to leave too. A hoarse and deep voice of a middle-aged man came from the side. Old Yang, don't mess around. You're our head worker. We can't even meet the standards. If you leave, what if something happens this week? That old Yang sighed. What else can happen? It's already so rotten. It doesn't matter if I stay here or not. The earlier I leave, the earlier I can go to Wujing to find my son. I can ask him to find me a job as a security guard. So, this head worker called Old Yang was quite pitiful. From the head worker of the sewage treatment plant to a security guard, the difference was quite big. But with his reputation in this industry, being the head worker of a sewage treatment plant that didn't meet the standards for 8 years, it was a joke. You can find a job as a security guard anytime. Don't be in a rush. I can't give you the money today. I'll give you the money next week after the inspection team leaves. Manager Guo, don't force me. Are you giving me the money now? No. Hey Guo, stop being arrogant. You've only been here for less than half a year and you're already trying to act all high and mighty. I don't like you for a long time. Give me the money. The industrial plant hasn't been doing well for so many years. It's all because of you. Look at your attitude. What attitude can I have? Didn't I try my best? This broken plant is just like this. It's the same no matter who comes. Inside, worker Yang and Guoming were getting more and more rowdy. There was a loud bang and suddenly there was a commotion inside. Don't. Old Yang, don't. Hold them back. Hold them back. Don't push. Old Gua, don't lower yourself to old Yang's level. They started fighting. Qin Guang, who was eavesdropping outside, quickly stepped forward and pushed the door open. He used a bit more force and the meeting room door flipped over and hit the wall with a thunder-like bang. Guoming and worker Yang, who were fighting, stopped and turned to look at Qin Guang at the same time. The other employees in the meeting room also did the same, not knowing who this uninvited guest was. Guoming's eyes widened. Qin Guang. Of course he remembered this student. Qin Guang looked at Guoming, whose hair was in a mess and whose face was covered in scratches. He scratched his head embarrassedly. Hello, Teacher Gua. That's right. This Guoming was the one who stood up for Qin Guang when he was dealing with Wang Ren. He testified in court and helped to contact Leng Qin. He was also Wang Ren's predecessor. Bang. While Guoming was still in a daze, Yang Gong regained his senses and threw a sneak attack on Guoming's face, causing him to see stars. Other people in the meeting room started to recognize Qin Guang, but Guoming and worker Yang were still fighting. It was an awkward moment and they didn't know what to do. Qin Guang walked up and pressed his hand on worker Yang's shoulder. The head worker's body went limp and he was lifted up by Qin Guang. Guoming didn't take the opportunity to fight back. He held his bleeding mouth and looked at Qin Guang awkwardly. Qin Guang, why are you here? Qin Guang sighed. Sigh. Guoming's eyes widened and he pointed at Qin Guang. Don't tell me, you. Letting out another sigh, Qin Guang pointed at his face and replied, That's right. I'm the one that you're talking about, the one that's filled with regret. You're stupid. Guoming stomped his feet again. He was worried about his money. He knew that the person who took the blame was called Qin Guang, but he didn't see his ID number and only knew that it was his name. Plus, he had been paying attention to Qin Guang's news. He didn't think that the popular Qin Guang would be so bored as to buy the doomed Xia Guang environmental protection. He wouldn't believe that the two Qin Guang were the same person. After all, Qin Guang was a smart person in his heart back then, and he didn't seem to have a screw loose in his brain. Now he had to believe it even if he didn't want to. The eyes of worker Yang, who was massaging Qin Guang, lit up. Boss Qin, it's good that you're here. You have to pay the severance fee, right? If not, we'll go to the Ministry of Manpower. Qin Guang turned around and glared at him. When did I say I'm going to pay the severance fee? What do you mean? Worker Yang struggled and Qin Guang let him go. However, Qin Guang paid no attention to him. He walked to the podium and knocked on the table. Quiet. Quiet down. Chapter 10:14. There were quite a few employees in the conference room who knew Qin Guang. Whispers and word of mouth had already spread his background to those who didn't know. The identity of a superstar was quite useful at times. In addition, he easily subdued old Yang with one hand, which made him even more prestigious. When everyone calmed down again, Qin Guang grinned. I have a few things to announce. Looking at your expressions, you should know who I am. That's right, I'm the new boss of Xia Guang Environmental Protection, and also the new boss of Tongshan Industrial Wastewater Treatment Plant. I'm also the Qin Guang that you all know from TV. After saying this, Qin Guang habitually waited for the cheers below. He felt that his entrance was quite domineering. After all, his fame was not just for show. But after waiting for a long time, there was no movement. And then, finally an employee asked. The slightly embarrassed Qin Guang coughed lightly. Then today's meeting is adjourned. Everyone return to your respective positions. As for this company, I have no plans to dismiss it for the time being. How can that be? I've already discussed with the property management company in Wujing. Yang Gong was the first to make a fuss. With him taking the lead, there were another 20 to 30 employees who objected. That's right. Staying here is a waste of time anyway. Even if you're Qin Guang, it's useless. Boss Qin, don't tell me you still want to save this plant? Save your energy. Boss Xia has been struggling for 8 years. It's useless. Just be merciful and give us our severance pay. Let us go. That's right. N+1. Guoming came over from the side and whispered, Qin Guang, ignore their unreasonable pestering. There's no reason for them to ask you for money. Qin Guang nodded and slammed the table. Are you guys mistaken? I'm the boss. I haven't even said anything about dismissal, And you guys are helping me dissolve the company? If you want to leave, then you're resigning. Don't King talk about severance pay. Don't be so shameless. The audience was in an uproar. After all, they often saw Chen Guang on TV. They thought that he was a celebrity and should pay attention to his public image. They didn't expect Chen Guang to be so arrogant. Forget it. Pay me the last 3 months' salary and I'll leave now. Worker Yang came forward again. Chen Guang turned to look at him. Shut up. Sit down. Being stared at by him, Worker Yang's hair stood on end and he sat down in embarrassment. A burly man in the crowd was unconvinced. Chen Guang, don't think that you're so great just because you're a celebrity. Why are you being so arrogant? Boom. Chen Guang slammed his palm on the big table in the conference room in front of him, shattering it into pieces. Then he looked at the man and said, whether I'm arrogant or not has nothing to do with whether I'm a celebrity or not. It has everything to do with my fists. What, you're not convinced? The man sat down on the floor. I'm convinced. If you're convinced, then don't make a fuss. Chen Guang pressed his hand down again. This time everyone finally calmed down. I'll explain it simply. Since I'm here today, of course I want to save the factory. After all, I spent a lot of money to buy it. As for why I bought it and whether I'm really a fool, I'm not interested in explaining it to you slowly. Those who want to leave today, I won't keep them. But those who feel that I can save the factory and are willing to stay, please stay. Chen Guang turned to Guoming and nodded. Teacher Guo, continue to pay. Those who want to leave, let them go. Worker Yang stood up again. Guoming wanted to keep him, but Chen Guang said, let him go. There's no use in keeping such a person. If he leaves now, he'll regret it in the future. Worker Yang took the money and walked out happily. He laughed and said, I won't regret it. Chen Guang said, wait another 5 minutes and you'll regret it. Impossible. Worker Yang decided to stay and see how Chen Guang was going to make him regret it. 5 minutes later, about half of the 60 employees in the factory came to collect their 3 months' salary and were ready to leave. The rest decided to stay. Maybe it was because of Chen Guang's celebrity status, or maybe they were fans of Almighty Superman. Those who were more familiar with him knew that up until now, Almighty Bro had never failed in anything he wanted to do. Although this factory has been rotten for 8 years and there are only 7 days left before the deadline, what if Lu Tao, who was the first to get the money, actually stayed? Chen Guang knew that this young man had feelings for the factory, so he stayed as long as he could. Chen Guang turned to look at Worker Yang, who was peeking out the window. He grinned meaningfully. All right, those who are willing to stay, in addition to 3 months' salary, I'll give you an extra 3 months' salary as a bonus. Regardless of whether we can pass the inspection next week, and regardless of whether this factory will belong to Xiaoguang Environmental Protection or Tiansong Water Company, this is the bonus I'll give you. Also, if we really mess things up and I can't save the factory, I'll give you N+1 severance pay. Everyone who stays will get a share. The moment he said that, $1 million was gone. Worker Yang's face turned green. D*Mn, why didn't you say that earlier? It's just a few more days and he'll have tens of thousands of yuan in his pocket. In a short 5 minutes he immediately knew what he had missed out on. He really regretted it. Guoming muttered softly at the side, there's no need to waste so much money, right? Chen Guang shrugged nonchalantly. I've already wasted 170 million, why would I care about this million? I'm just happy. The old man was that rich and overbearing, that rich and willful. He wasn't done yet. He slammed the table again. Also, those who stay do a good job. If the factory can be saved, we won't play N+1 anymore. I'll give you 2N. But he wasn't really hot-headed and just throwing money around. The situation was dire, and God had only left him 7 days. Although he didn't know what to do now, if he wanted the horse to run fast, he had to feed it, right? He would chase away half of the people he didn't like and double the workload for the rest of the people. He would first use money to motivate everyone so that when he came up with an idea, he would be able to drag everyone in the factory to work hard. As long as it was a problem that could be solved with money, it wasn't a problem. In order to save 170 million, what was the big deal about burning $1 million first? Most importantly, he had to make those who left regret it. He had to show them how rich old Chen was. I'm already here, but all of you want to throw in the towel and leave. If you don't even want to do your last shift properly, then you're not giving me face. If you don't give me face, then I won't let you be happy. If you're unhappy, then I'll be happy. This money was well spent. You gave old Shirlai 170 million? Oh my God. On the other side, Guoming exclaimed. Obviously, he didn't know the exact amount of the transaction. He was only the general manager. Chen Guang shrugged. Yeah. Guoming couldn't help but say, "Are you stupid?" Qin Guang wanted to say that he wasn't stupid, but some god was stupid. But he didn't dare to say it, so he could only admit it. "Sigh, I'm stupid. I'm stupid because I shouldn't have trusted my emperor god's butler." No matter what, it took him less than half an hour to stabilize the situation in the factory. Although half of the people left, there was still a chief engineer like Worker Yang and a middle-level engineer like the mechanic class monitor. But there were at least 30 people left, so there wasn't a lack of manpower. Qin Guang first bragged about saving the factory. He had to be imposing, but he actually didn't have any ideas. He could only take it one step at a time. When they finally settled down, Qin Guang immediately pulled Guoming to his office. On one hand, he wanted to understand the specific situation of the factory, and on the other hand, he wanted to know why Guoming was here. As far as he knew, Guoming used to be a manager in a trading company in Wujing City. About half an hour later, Qin Guang sighed. "Teacher Guo, you can tell me if you have any difficulties." Guoming waved his hand. "How can this be considered a difficulty? It's just a normal job transfer. It's not like I'm working for an iron rice bowl. It's normal to change jobs. Half a year ago when I came to this factory, I was also full of ambition. I thought that if I could rely on the school's relationship and find more old experts, I might be able to save the factory. Who would have thought that even Professor Shu couldn't do anything about it? You can't say that. Back then, it was because of me that you had a hard time in your previous company, so you resigned. You don't have to come and mess with this mess. Teacher Guo, I can still trust you. If you come to my Qingguang group, I can arrange a job for you, right?" Guoming shook his head. "You're still talking about me. Didn't you also fall into this mess? I'm just a worker. If I just leave like that, aren't you worse off than me?" Qin Guang's face stiffened. Damn, he really couldn't refute that. Thinking about it carefully, he was the real tragedy. Furthermore, how can you say that it was your fault back then? Didn't you also help out when you saw injustice? Losing my job is a small matter. The important thing is that I can live with my conscience, right? Although I changed jobs because of this, my heart is at peace. I don't have to live tiredly anymore. Qin Guang nodded. "Teacher Guo, you're right. Also, I'm too prideful to ask you for help." Guoming changed the topic and chuckled. "But this time, Xia Guang Environmental Protection won't drag your company down, right? It won't collapse. I'm super rich now." "Then does your company need security? When can I go to work?" Qin Guang, "Teacher Guo, are you giving my Xia Guang Environmental Protection a death sentence? Can't we save it together? Isn't it good to be alive? I still don't get it. How did you end up in this factory? Didn't I already say don't ask about this?" As the two of them were chatting, Guoming's office door was suddenly pushed open. A big fat girl walked in. "Teacher Guo, there's news that Qin Guang is here?" "Yo Qin Guang, long time no see." Qin Guang looked up and was slightly surprised. "Huh. Senior Hualing, why are you here?" Chapter 10-15. Suddenly meeting an old friend, Qin Guang was naturally very happy. Zhongyu, a fellow student from Lilai County, also followed behind, and after meeting they exchanged greetings. Hualing and Zhongyu already knew that Qin Guang had been fooled, and they resisted making fun of him. Since Zhuo Jingxi left Gokyo University and went to the United States for further study, Qin Guang and Hualing and Zhongyu have lost contact. On the one hand, he was too busy. On the other hand, although the two senior sisters were good people, they were not from the same world, and there were few places where they could intersect. However, even if they hadn't seen each other for a long time, Hualing and Zhongyu obviously knew Qin Guang's movements very well. After some conversation, Qin Guang knew the cause and effect of the matter, and he had to sigh at the ingenuity of fate. It turned out that since Guoming came here as the general manager, he was still looking for ways to help Boss Xia. Guoming used his few connections and invited several well-known domestic experts and professors through Wujing University. However, after everyone came to see it one after another, almost all of them determined that Tongshan Industrial Factory was almost hopeless and could only be overthrown and restarted. Boss Xia was simply unable to bear the cost of reconstruction, and he didn't even have the 8 million yuan needed for ordinary technical transformation. Finally, after a big circle, Guoming finally had the cheek to find Professor Xu Lirong, who was almost retired. After Professor Xu came to see it in person, she had the same view as the previous experts and scholars. It's not that she didn't want to help, but she really didn't have the strength. Without money, no matter how good the show was, it couldn't be done. In the past, when Xia Guang Environmental Protection was still rich, it spent 1 or 200 million yuan on technical transformation, but it didn't have any effect. Professor Xu also felt that Tongshan Industrial Factory was too old to go back, and her face was dead. But when she saw Guoming's pitiful appearance, she thought that after Zhuo Jingxi left, Hualing and Zhong Yu would not be able to adapt to changing to other laboratories, so she simply let the two of them come to Tongshan Industrial Factory to do experiments. Although Hualing and Zhong Yu were only graduate students, they had been working with Zhuo Jingxi for more than a year. In the projects led by Professor Xu, they had more or less achieved some results. In any case, conventional methods were already ineffective. It was better to let Hualing and Zhong Yu try their luck with the new photocatalyst that was still being developed and verified here, hoping that a blind cat would run into a dead mouse. It was hard to say how effective it would be. Even if it was useful, it was unknown whether the current laboratory sample production capacity could support the industrial application in the Tongshan industrial plant. However, it was a last resort. He dealt with Guoming and gave him some comfort. At the same time, he could also help them complete their graduate thesis. Therefore, Hualing and Zhong Yu had been living at the Tongshan Industrial Wastewater Treatment Plant since the beginning of the semester. The two of them were just students who came here to do experiments. Naturally, they didn't need to participate in the staff meeting just now. Later, when they heard other employees in the factory mention Qin Guang, the two of them rushed over excitedly. After chatting about trivial things, Hualing remembered something important. "Oh yeah, Manager Gua, this morning's water test report is out." "How is it?" Zhong Yu picked up a piece of paper. "It's still the same as before, it can't reach 3 standards. Qin Guang reached out from the side and looked down. "Oh my god, the COD of the effluent is more than 700. This is the same as not treating it. The concentration of domestic wastewater is only 3 to 400, right?" Hualing nodded. "The treatment effect is quite poor. The comprehensive concentration of the effluent is less than 2000, and the pollutant removal rate is less than 70%. Strange, you seem to know a lot about it." Qin Guang chuckled. "How can I tell you guys? Back then, I went to the Cup realm to learn about environmental impact assessment and environmental politics for an exam. Not to mention, Qin Guang was really familiar with ordinary sewage treatment technology and policies and regulations. But he didn't expect to rely on his unconventional knowledge to turn something rotten into something magical. Environmental assessment was just a deformed product of the entire environmental protection science in response to the needs of the policy. No matter how proficient he was in environmental assessment, he couldn't even be considered to be proficient in the technical integration, research and development design, operation debugging, and even functional transformation of the specific sewage treatment station. So many well-known experts and scholars, including his own teachers, had failed here. Qin Guang wasn't arrogant enough to think that he was better than others in environmental assessment. His knowledge in this area was only learned through the most basic targeted training in the Jianling Tianyi Cup. It was all stuff that he memorized. He was really far from being an environmental scientist or a master of technology. But since he was already here, he had to go and take a look. He waved his hand. "Okay, let's not talk anymore. Let's go around the factory and see the specific situation." Hualing, who was next to him, waved her hand. "Hey, look at the situation now. This factory is doomed. What are you looking at?" Zhong Yu, who was next to her, also nodded. "That's right. I think you should hurry back to the 5 capitals. Otherwise, you can find your friends and find a way to sell Xia Guang environmental protection as soon as possible. Then you can find a scapegoat to pay the bill for you and get as much as you can." Guoming also muttered. "Qin Guang, you haven't seen it yet. You don't know how bad the situation is. You looked very confident just now, thinking that the factory can still be saved. But listen to me, it's hopeless. It's really hopeless. Aren't you on good terms with the Rising Sea Fund? Hurry up and think of a way to let them take the blame for you." Qin Guang looked at the three of them silently. After all this time, they still sentenced Xia Guang environmental protection to death in their minds. He silently cried, thinking, "Do you think I don't want to push the blame? But the problem is, where can I push the blame? Although there are a lot of idiots in the world breaker path, I can count the number of idiots who can take out more than 100 million with my fingers. Only Lori. Oh no, only me, okay?" Looking for Rao Jinghai from the Rising Sea Fund seemed like a solution, but Rao Jinghai had just scammed him not long ago. There was also the special factor of the compensation from the old masters for his resignation. Now he had no reason and position to do favors. Even if he did, he wouldn't be able to do it. Seeing his embarrassed expression, Hualing asked tentatively, "You really can't find an idiot to take the blame?" Qin Guang pointed at himself. "The person standing in front of you is probably the last idiot on earth." Sigh. The three of them sighed in unison again. It was really a tragedy. Let's go. Let me take a look around first. All right. After walking out of the door, Qin Guang still felt unhappy. The three of them were the ones who watched the old man create a miracle. The old man felt very discouraged when he saw the three of them looking so dispirited. He decided to boost their morale a little. If I say that I feel that I can definitely save this factory, will you believe me? Guoming was shocked. Are you crazy? Don't tell me you want to use your own money to continue to fill a bottomless pit? Hualing, you want to rebuild the factory with your own money? Guoming, no. Absolutely not. Qin Guang, why haven't you thought about the possibility that you can handle the investigation in 7 days? Then Xia Guang Environmental Protection will have a few months left. I remember there is a clause in the contract that as long as the factory continues to meet the emission standards in the next few months, the expiration date can slowly increase, right? Hualing rolled her eyes. Zhong Yu covered her mouth and snickered. The more daring you are, the more productive you are. Guoming, wake up. Qin Guang, wake up. You're not a magician. The wastewater that can't meet the target is right there. You can't just make it disappear with a whoosh. Don't tell me you're trying to pull some strings to get away with it? Guoming's eyes gradually lit up as he spoke. He knew that Qin Guang's status was different from the past. He might really be able to do something behind the scenes. But not long after, he shook his head dejectedly and muttered to himself, "No, it won't work. The people from Tiansong have been here a few times already, and they are determined to get it. We are also famous for being rotten in the country. Doing something behind the scenes is equivalent to blinding the eyes of the whole world. The impact is too big. It is impossible for Tiansong water to not interfere. Besides, you can deceive them for a while, but you can't deceive them forever. Sai, it's embarrassing to talk about it. Go back and take a look at Tongshan River and you'll understand. If I don't meet the target, I won't have the face to continue staying here." Qin Guang said angrily, "Who said I'm going to do something behind the scenes?" Hualing patted his shoulder from behind. "Then don't talk nonsense. How are you going to deal with the inspection next week?" Qin Guang announced that the morale-boosting plan had failed. Even he himself began to consider what kind of job to arrange for Guoming in Tianguang Group. When the four of them finally walked around the factory, he finally understood why Guoming and the others were so desperate. The situation was much more serious than he had imagined. The entire sewage treatment system was a tragedy. The entire process, from the process unit design to the tank structure, from the sewage retention time to the depth of aeration, were densely packed problems. None of them were reliable. For example, in sewage treatment, especially in the biochemical treatment of low to medium concentration wastewater, the aerobic aeration process was the core function group. The conventional aerobic tank body had to reach a depth of more than 3.5 meters. Once it was below this depth, the air that erupted from the aeration head would not have enough contact with the water body. The dissolved oxygen in the water body would not rise much, and it would directly escape from the water surface in the form of bubbles. Then all the aerobic microorganisms would suffocate due to the lack of oxygen. In addition, because of the unreasonable design of the tank body, the capacity of the functional units was insufficient, which further led to the lack of retention time. The pollutant removal reaction time was too short, and the effluent still did not meet the target. However, the above situation was not the biggest problem of the entire Tongshan Industrial Park sewage treatment plant. The biggest drawback was still in the early stage of the classification and pretreatment design. Chapter 10:16. The super-complex incoming water was directly mixed in the front grill without any separate pretreatment, and then it was directly pumped into the anaerobic biochemical tank, causing the pH of the tank to be acidic. There were also antibiotic pollutants that could be used to kill bacteria, and because the incoming water contained high-salt wastewater from the pickle factory, it had a very high salinity. Biochemical treatment relied on microorganisms. The growth condition of anaerobic bacteria was a weak alkaline pH of about 9 to 10. After the comprehensive mixing, the wastewater had heavy metal ions and was weak acidic. There were also antibiotics that inhibited the growth of microorganisms, and the high salinity was almost sterilizing saline, which would also inhibit the growth of microorganisms. It was like a war between two armies. If the commander on one side poisoned his soldiers with arsenic, how could the war be fought? Although Qin Guang was only an undergraduate student, he had memorized the environmental impact assessment knowledge back then, so he could be considered proficient in this aspect. Along the way, he couldn't help being speechless as he sighed. Fuck, microorganisms that can reproduce under such conditions are practically cockroaches in the microorganism world. Microorganisms are even more precious than pandas, and I can count them with a single hand. How many of them can survive? So it would be weird if they could treat wastewater. Guoming and the other two really didn't expect Chen Guang to understand it at first glance. He didn't even need to explain and could see through the problem. He was so skilled that he didn't seem like a university student. Guoming nodded. Yes, we have already worked very hard to adjust the parameters and cultivate the specific bacteria. The biochemical treatment is still a little effective, but it is still a long way from reaching the standard. Look at this anaerobic tank. The real efficient tank water should be black, but what is this gray color? The anaerobic bacteria inside are all dead. Hey, look at this aerobic sedimentation tank. The mud is all black and it's all floating on the water. It's dead, it's all dead. It stinks. There is no need to test the water. The feces are yellow. Just by looking at the color, you can tell it's not qualified. How dare they discharge this water? Aren't they afraid of being beaten to death? The person who designed this factory is really a genius. Hualing, huh? This is a genius? Yes, it's so rotten that no one has ever done it before. It can be said to destroy the world. Ordinary people can't do it, really can't. He didn't even die, so his survival ability must be super strong. Boss Xia is also a talent. He really dares to repair it? Wu Ming said, Mr. Xia doesn't understand technology. The previous design unit was appointed by the management committee of the scenic area. Qin Guang, the person in charge of the management committee, is also a talent. Has he been promoted? Guoming said, he went to prison a few years ago. I don't think he'll be out for another 10 or 20 years. Qin Guang said, just lock him up for the rest of his life. This kind of person will bring disaster to the country and the people if he is released. As Qin Guang walked, his comments made Guoming and the rest's eyes light up. They didn't expect him to not be putting on an act, but to be really knowledgeable. When he finally finished one round, Hualing looked him up and down in surprise. I can't tell, I really can't tell. Zhong Yu also nodded. I underestimated you. The three of them couldn't help but be surprised. Although they knew that Qin Guang majored in environmental science in university, looking at the abilities he had displayed in the past 6 months, especially his recently published Super Abnormal World's Most Complete Foreign Language Teaching Material, how could he have had the time to learn specialized courses? But now, the knowledge he displayed showed that not only did he learn, but he also understood it very well. Are you even human? Is your brain filled with a computer? Let's open your brain and see how many things are in it. Did you stuff a 10,000 terabytes SSD in it? Qin Guang couldn't help but feel smug as they looked at him with admiration. Of course. It's not that I want to brag, but if I was in charge of the environmental impact assessment of the factory, I would have improved the process from start to finish, and it wouldn't have been this bad. Zhong Yu clasped her hands together and looked at him with burning eyes. Do you have an idea now? What can we do to pass next week's inspection? Guoming and Hualing were also looking at Qin Guang. After all, Qin Guang had always been confident, and he had often created miracles in the past. He would always be able to grasp the crux of the journey, looking like someone that could be relied on. Qin Guang shook his head, took a deep breath and grinned. Oh, pfft. I'll go. Qin Guang scratched his head embarrassedly. Old Gua, didn't you say that I'm not a magician? I can't do anything about it. After searching the factory for a whole day, the group still had no clue. When the sky gradually turned dark, Qin Guang first brought the entire factory's 30 people to Tongshan City's Hot Pot City to have a good meal. Even if he had no clue, he braced himself and cheered the remaining 30 people on. In the end, he almost believed it himself. The highest level of shamelessness was to lie to yourself. When the others returned to the factory, Qin Guang found a hotel in the city, signed a month's contract and stayed there. Lying alone in the room, Qin Guang stood in front of the window and looked in the direction of the sewage station. There was no one around, and his heart was filled with infinite melancholy. He squeezed the heavenly Holy Grail in his hand. It seemed that it was time to rely on the Grail to save the world again. He counted the number of faith points he had saved up. It was close to 30 million units. It was enough for him to drink 4 times in the one-line heavenly cup. As the saying goes, raise an army for 1,000 days, use it for a moment. With so many faith points saved, why don't I give myself a heavenly Holy Grail that specializes in environmental science? 10 seconds later, Qin Guang let out a long sigh. No. How desperate. Walking into the heavenly Holy Grail, he realized that he had underestimated the difficulty and level of the environmental protection industry. Unlike other specialized disciplines, environmental science is a particularly large comprehensive discipline. It requires a deep understanding of industry, chemical principles, physics, chemistry, electrochemistry, microbiology, automation, economics, policies and regulations, and countless other subdisciplines. It is also necessary to integrate these deep knowledge into one's mind and form a system. For example, to design a sewage treatment plant for a chemical company, then first of all, one must know the overall process of the company like the back of one's hand. Knowing the characteristics of the quality and quantity of wastewater produced by the various sections of the company, then one can design a targeted classification and treatment process. Then, even if the source of the sewage is clear, in the actual treatment process, if you want to use electrolysis, then you must understand electrochemistry. If you want to use photocatalysis, sterilization, or molecular chain breaking processes, then you must also understand photochemistry. Entering the later sections, there are still a lot of problems. To flocculate sludge, you must understand chelates. To use oxidation ditch process, you must understand fluid mechanics. Finally, it is built and running, then you must domesticate microorganisms and understand microbiology. If you want to cultivate specific bacteria, you must also understand genetics. The complete environmental protection science was a super complicated subject that was formed by the integration of countless huge modern sciences. If it is just to design and operate an ordinary sewage treatment plant, even a fresh graduate can easily do it. But if you want to go further, only a long time of painstaking work and extraordinary understanding and logical thinking ability are left. Because of the huge and almost endless super-complex characteristics, it is easy to get started but difficult to master. The difficulty is even higher than simple mathematicians, physicists, and economists. For example, Zhuo Jingxi's mentor, Xu Lirong. A few years ago there was a large-scale sewage treatment plant in Sichuan province that used oxidation ditch process, but they encountered a big problem. The microorganisms in the oxidation ditch could not flocculate activated sludge, and it easily sank to the bottom of the water and became dead mud. Many experts in the country were found, but they could not find the reason. Later, Professor Xu was invited to help. Professor Xu walked around the factory, then took out a pen and paper and did some calculations. He arranged for someone to move the thruster in the middle of the oxidation ditch, which was originally 30 meters away, to 73 meters away. The problem was immediately solved. When the problem was solved, many people suddenly realized that it was so simple. Why did we not think of it in the beginning? But in reality, it was Professor Xu who first used the knowledge in his mind to make a perfect judgment of the entire wastewater treatment plant. Then he was able to find the crux of the problem and calculate the time it took for the microorganisms in the oxidation ditch to naturally split in half an hour. Then, through a series of complex fluid mechanics calculations, he was able to come up with the most feasible technical modification plan. The final plan was the result of simplifying the complex, but the process of diagnosis and conceptualization before that was truly masterful. Without reaching that level, one would never understand the key. There was a thin layer of silk between understanding and not understanding, but many people could not pierce through this layer of silk even if they used their entire life's effort. This was the reason why this industry was always short of talented people. It was too difficult for a person to become a master in the environmental protection industry, and it required too much accumulation. In other industries, many real geniuses could come up with world-class results at the age of 30. As for the environmental protection industry, people at the age of 30 still haven't learned all kinds of basic subjects, let alone become a master? Environmental impact assessment was just the tip of the iceberg in this industry. It was a drop in the ocean, barely an entrance ticket. The evaluation results given to Chen Guang by the world in the cup were as follows. If he wanted to become the strongest master in one go, he had to at least reach the third level of the world in the cup. As for the one-line sky, perhaps he could focus on training his ability in water pollution control. As for other aspects of knowledge such as waste gas, solid waste, ecological restoration, etc., there were also botany, meteorology, geophysics, and other abnormal subjects waiting for him. Oh yes, even if it was only industrial wastewater, there were also paper-making wastewater, synthetic chemical wastewater, extraction wastewater, mining wastewater, and hundreds of other wastewater systems with completely different water quality and quantity. Chen Guang said, "I choose to die." Even if he really burned these 30 million faith points to become the most powerful comprehensive industrial wastewater treatment master in history, it would be useless. No matter how powerful a master was, he couldn't turn the water in the pool into pure water in 7 days. At that time, the review team would take water samples from all sections of the entire Tongshan Industrial Park sewage treatment plant. It would be useless even if drugs were added in a certain section. Lord Azure, do me a favor. No way. This is just a trivial matter. Lord Azure, take out some divine power from your crotch and it will be done in a few minutes. Give me a super powerful superhuman strain that can detoxify all pollutants in minutes? Get lost. Do you think my divine power is cabbage? Do you know how exaggerated your request is? Isn't a strain a species? You want me to create a new creature for you? Do you know how difficult it is to create this? You want me to write code for you one by one from the DNA level? And it has to be able to grow enough for your entire sewage treatment plant. Why don't you just rob someone? Then directly make the pollutants disappear? Hee hee, do you think that's realistic? Talking to a god about reality is not realistic. Go go go, I don't have time to talk nonsense with you. Anyway, my divine power is not enough. How much divine power do I need? Enough to save your life 10,000 times. Qingguang thought about it. 10,000 lives were more valuable. Sigh, but you are the one who bought it. Ouch 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 ouch. Coming out of the cup world with a swollen face, Qingguang silently covered his heart. What the F***, what a scam. Could it be that I can only admit defeat? Admitting defeat would damage the old man's Taoist heart, and it would make the old man's thoughts unclear. Damn it, if I really can't do it, I'll really call the old man. I'll sell my old face and cover the sky with one hand for once to deal with the current investigation. Wait, it seems that there is no need to use the old man's relationship. Looking for Uncle Wushan or Secretary Ma should be enough for this period of time. Later I'll completely rebuild it out of my own pocket. Earning more or less is one thing, but I can't admit defeat. With this idea in mind, he immediately went online to check the situation of this potential opponent, Tiansong Water Company. After all, the other party seemed to be determined to win. He knew the name of Tiansong Water Company, but he was not very clear about the background of this company. He didn't know if he didn't check, but after checking he was even more furious. After all this time, the boss of Tiansong Water Company was an old acquaintance. A long time ago, Qingguang was dragged by Tang Ying to watch the movie, Tears Never End for Rivers and Mountains. He pretended to be her boyfriend just to make a guy named Song Ningyuan give up. At that time, Tang Ying and Qingguang had mentioned Tiansong Water Company, but he had forgotten about it after the incident. Now that he saw the words Song Ningyuan, the legal representative of Tiansong Water Company, the memory slowly emerged from the bottom of his heart. No wonder he didn't like this guy at that time. It turned out that they were fated to be incompatible. Qingguang covered his face. Needless to say, if Song Ningyuan found out that he was the one who stole the operating rights of the Tongshan Industrial Park wastewater treatment plant from Qingguang's hands, this guy would probably wake up laughing in his dreams after getting his revenge. I don't accept this. I can't let my enemy feel good. Qingguang gritted his teeth and clenched his fists tightly. He suddenly had a stronger sense of mission to protect the wastewater treatment plant. Heaven never bars one's way, people can't be suffocated to death, there must be a way. This time, his obsession made Qingguang unable to sleep for the entire night. He played games the whole night. Chapter 10:17. Fortunately, Qingguang was a martial sage realm powerhouse. Even if he did not sleep for the whole night, his internal force would pass through his face for a while and there would not be dark circles under his eyes. At about 7 o'clock in the morning, he first called Lin Jingwei to wake up and pee, and then asked them to help him apply for a daily long leave from school. On the school's side, from the principal to Dean Han, there was no good way to deal with his school style of being a slacker. They had already greeted him and recorded his demerit, but he was popular and had a net worth of N billion yuan. He often did big projects that were worth hundreds of millions of yuan. He was willing to go back to school for classes when he was free. He could already be called an example among the current generation of star students. Then again, old Han also received a promise from Qingguang. Regardless of how many classes Qingguang skipped, Qingguang's final exam results had to be presentable. As for his elective course, that was better to save it. It was said that the teachers of the School of Foreign Languages were almost worshipping his picture as a saint. If he wanted those who worshipped him like a god to deduct a point from him, it would probably be like holding a knife to their necks. However, old Han was still in a good mood, although he felt that it might be too black-bellied to think so. After all, it was very bad to gloat when others were unlucky. But he really could not help but be secretly happy. Qingguang actually became the man who took over the sewage treatment station of Tongshan Industrial Park. Oh my god, just how blind is he? As the dean of the School of Architecture and Environment of Gokyo University, old Han used to be in charge of the Department of Environment. Although his status in the academic world was not as high as that of Professor Xu Lirong, it was not too far away. Previously, Guoming personally drove him there once, and then old Han sincerely patted Guoming on the shoulder on the spot. "Xiao Guo, why don't you come back to school? Now that Su Lijing is gone, the school is also clear and bright. I will definitely not let you suffer anymore." Well, Guoming did not save the factory and almost got himself into trouble. Old man Han's low opinion of Xia Huanghan could be seen at a glance. It was 8:30 in the morning when Qin Guang arrived at the factory. Yesterday he gave out the money through a verbal check and took the remaining 30 or so people to eat a big meal. Although the workers in the factory didn't know what to do, they were very enthusiastic and came to work one after another. Once again, Qin Guang was like a headless fly as he looked around the factory. He even ran to Hua Ling and Zhong Yu's laboratory to see the progress of their experiment. By noon he still had no idea what to do. His head was in a mess. Sitting in the empty chairman's office with only an old computer left, Qin Guang desperately rubbed his temples. He hadn't had such a headache for a long time. It's not that he didn't think about hiring experts, but on second thought, even if he forced his way into the heavenly cup and became the strongest industrial wastewater pollution prevention and control master, it was still useless. How could he count on others? Why not invite David Copperfield over and have him magically remove the contaminants from the water? Forget it, he felt that it would be easier to make the people of the review team disappear. Or, he could use his supreme martial sage realm martial arts to blast all the contaminants in the pool into dregs? Forget it, no matter how powerful a martial artist was, he still had to abide by the law of conservation of matter. The contaminants were originally dissolved in water. What was the use of turning them into dregs? The supernatural ability of the Great Earth Explosion? Qin Guang immediately refuted himself. Although the Great Earth Explosion could control soil and other earth-based substances, the contaminants were all in the water and were in liquid form. He couldn't do that. Just as he was having a headache, someone knocked on the office door. Xiao Lu, who he had some impression of yesterday, stood at the door with an ugly expression. He looked like he wanted to say something but stopped. "What's wrong?" Qin Guang stood up and asked. Lu Tao looked at Qin Guang nervously. "Mr. Qin, Manager Guo told me not to disturb you." Qin Guang waved his hand. "What's the matter? Don't hide it. It's like this. The people from the Municipal Environmental Protection Bureau just came." Qin Guang was puzzled. "Isn't the review team coming next week? Why are they coming earlier?" Lu Tao turned his head and looked outside. "Mr. Qin, come with me. It seems that someone reported us." Deputy Bureau Chief Pang of the Municipal Public Security Bureau brought people to cause trouble again. Manager Guo is still dealing with them, but their attitude is very bad. They said that they want a fine again. Mr. Xia just paid the fine half a month ago. How can they come again so soon? This is too much. Qin Guang's face was gloomy as he followed Lu Tao to the reception conference room next door. Such a high frequency of fines is somewhat unreasonable. Lu Tao said as he walked, "I heard that those people who left the factory yesterday followed Chief Yang to the entrance of the Municipal Environmental Protection Bureau to put up a banner. He also found a group of people to follow behind and make a fuss. The leaders of the Municipal Public Security Bureau can't do anything about it. Aren't they afraid of the people making trouble these days? No wonder. It's inexplicable." Qin Guang quickened his pace. Just when he reached the door of the conference room, he heard voices coming from inside. "Manager Guo, please ask your new boss to come out." We all heard that he came to the factory yesterday. Chief Pang, Mr. Qin really went back. Why don't you come another day? We just fined him at the beginning of this month. How can he pay again now? Deputy Bureau Chief Pang snorted. "Manager Guo, do you think I'm blind? When I came in, I saw a Passat with an A license plate in the parking lot. Do you think it's Mr. Chen's?" Guoming didn't expect Deputy Bureau Chief Pang to look at it so carefully. He was momentarily speechless. "Well, Manager Guo, you can't be careless today. The people along the river blocked the entrance of our bureau again. We have to give them an explanation. The fine at the beginning of the month is at the beginning of the month. But now we are not talking about the last time. Look at these lists. They are the losses suffered by the people along the river over the years. Look at this fish farm. All the fish in the pond are dead. Tens of thousands of economic losses. You haven't even paid 1/3 of it. And look at this lotus pond. Look at the stinky water in the pond. Isn't it miserable?" When Manager Xia was in charge, he kept delaying this matter. "I heard that Mr. Qin is quite rich. Then you have to get rid of this matter quickly. You have to give them an explanation." Guoming panicked. Chief Pang, stop joking. It's true that Mr. Chin is rich, but it doesn't come from nowhere. Besides, didn't we pay the compensation last year and the year before that? It's not 1/3 of it. This is not the figure on the previous bills. Deputy Bureau Chief Pang said, last year was last year. This year the fish are dead again. Are you kidding me? Everyone knows that the water in Tangshan River cannot be used. I don't believe that these people will continue to raise the fish even though they know that it cannot be raised. The compensation was also the buyout price. Bang. Someone slammed the table. Deputy Bureau Chief Pang was furious. Guoming, do you have any sense of social responsibility? What the hell is going on in your head? Guoming was also furious. Whether I have any sense of responsibility or not is completely different from what Chief Pang said. Don't confuse us. We will bear the responsibility that should be borne by our factory. Don't put the blame on us if it's not our responsibility. Besides, it was Manager Xia's factory that caused the losses to the farmers along the river. Manager Xia also had a good plan to deal with the aftermath. Now that Mr. Chin has just arrived, Chief Pang, you are bringing up the past again. This is not fair. You want to talk to me about the rules? Fine, I will talk to you about the rules too. I will say this now. The pollution your factory caused to Tangshan River is enough for you managers to go to jail for a few years. Your Mr. Chin is very rich, right? I will say this now. Since he is the boss of Tangshan Industrial Factory, he has to bear the responsibility. No matter how rich he is, he can't hide the truth. I will send the note now. All of you better wait for your jail time. Let's go. Deputy Chief Pang roared again. The next moment, the door in front of Qin Guang was flung open. A chubby middle-aged man with a square face walked out angrily. He looked up and saw Qin Guang. He did not take it seriously at first. He turned his face away and continued to walk forward. Guoming ran out from behind the door and saw Qin Guang. He subconsciously opened his mouth and said, Mr. Qin. Deputy Chief Pang took 2 steps forward and stopped. He looked back at Qin Guang. His eyes were puzzled at first, then he narrowed his eyes and looked at him carefully. His mouth gradually opened wide. Qin Guang? Obviously, this Deputy Chief Pang was very concerned about current affairs and news. He knew Qin Guang. Qin Guang nodded. That's me. You are Deputy Chief Pang, right? Guoming came up to him and looked embarrassed. Mr. Qin, why are you here? It's not a big deal. Qin Guang turned his head and looked at him. This is not a big deal? I spent 170 million to buy a factory, and I have to go to jail for breaking the law? This is not a big deal? Deputy Chief Pang, I'm a coward. Don't give me a heart attack. Deputy Chief Pang could tell that something was wrong with Qin Guang's tone and did not know what to say. He looked at Guoming and said, Manager Gua, why didn't you tell me earlier that Mr. Qin is Qin Guang? Guoming shrugged. I thought Chief Yang had told you. Deputy Chief Pang stomped his feet. Damn it. That Yang set me up. Qin Guang asked. What? Deputy Chief Pang broke out in cold sweat. Nothing. Nothing. As a deputy chief in the government, he knew a lot about the gossip in the government. Back then, when Qin Guang dealt with Su Lijing to establish his prestige, it could be considered as an earthquake in China's bureaucracy. Su Lijing, a deputy minister, was defeated by an undergraduate student and even died on the spot in court. The people in the government couldn't help but feel sorry for this kind of shocking news, so they paid more attention to it. As a result, a lot of gossip related to the conflict between Su Lijing and Qin Guang was talked about in their spare time. This kind of gossip, which was almost like an unofficial anecdote, was not particularly widespread. However, Tangshan City was adjacent to Wujing City, and Deputy Chief Pang liked to ask around, so he naturally heard the most about it. Deputy Chief Pang had heard a lot about Qin Guang's brief detention. Secretary Ma personally escorted him, and Wu Shan, the head of the Provincial Public Security, Procuratorate and People's Court, personally escorted him. Later, with Qin Guang's meteoric rise, the Shanghai Financial Group gave him 1 billion yuan, which further proved that Qin Guang was definitely not a poor student with no background, but the second generation of the mysterious. Of course, Qin Guang's own celebrity status and his personal achievements in various industries also raised his personal status in Deputy Chief Pang's heart. Recently there was another piece of news. Their crew went to Baishui County of Kainan Province, which was far away from the government. When they returned, the entire Kainan Province was shaken, and Baishui County was even more tragic. The famous father and son of Tongyuan Real Estate committed suicide to escape punishment, and more than 100 people were arrested and sentenced. The Baishui case was broadcasted on CCTV for several days in a row, and it became a typical case. At that time, Deputy Chief Pang, who was very smart, completely matched the time of the news that the crew of women went to Baishui River to film. He would never believe that the two had nothing to do with each other. He knew that the new boss of Xiaoguang Environmental Protection was called Qin Guang, but he had never seen him in person. Like Guoming, he did not associate the two Qin Guangs together. Now he knew that this Qin Guang was the Qin Guang. Chapter 10:18. Deputy Commissioner Pang thought that his ruthless words must have been heard clearly. How could he not be so scared that his legs turned to jelly and his pants became wet? Even if I had 10,000 guts, I still wouldn't provoke him. Qin Guang still had a straight face. Then may I ask, Deputy Commissioner Pang, what do you mean by this? Really, don't scare me. I can't take threats. Cold sweat trickled down Deputy Director Pang's chubby face. He wiped his forehead and said, Boss? Boss Qin, I was just joking. You know, environmental protection is not easy now. We have to clean up our mess and the people blame us for everything. We don't have much power, so it's hard to enforce environmental protection laws. Think about it, we are also environmentalists. We work hard to protect our motherland. Sometimes, when we deal with companies, if we don't act a little forcefully, they will pour black water into the river. Your factory is really... Deputy Commissioner Pang was indeed a wily old fox who had been in the system for many years. Seeing that the situation was not good, he immediately tried to act pitiful. He had heard that Qin Guang had a sense of justice and had studied environmental protection in Gokyo University. Therefore, he tried to stir up sympathy by talking about the difficulties of environmentalists. Hearing those words, Qin Guang's face loosened up as he replied, I understand that. But according to what I know, the previous chairman of the Xiaoguang Environmental Protection Company had dealt with everything before he left. Even if the farmers along the river suffered losses, it's Chairman Xia's problem. Now that this factory belongs to me, I'll let bygones be bygones. I had no choice but to do this because someone was causing trouble in front of the municipal bureau. I had to at least put on a show to appease them. Qin Guang grinned. Was it really just a show? No one promised you that they would share some benefits with you if they made money? Deputy Commissioner Pang shook his head violently, the fat on his face like streaky pork. No, absolutely not. Even if there was, he could not admit it now. That's good. Go back to where you came from. Qin Guang waved his hand impatiently, wanting to drive this pretentious guy away. Deputy Commissioner Pang thought to himself, if I just leave like this, won't Boss Xia bear a grudge against me later? Impossible. I have to drag that young guy out to attract hatred. Chief Qin, here's the thing. Originally, I came here today to give those troublemakers an explanation. In the past, Chief Xia lost everything. But think about it, the fish pond is indeed contracted by others every year. This year they didn't throw in any fish seedlings, but they didn't produce any. It's just like the land. The land was destroyed. That's like taking drastic measures. So you want me to compensate you? Qin Guang's eyes widened. Deputy Commissioner Pang explained the situation to him. He also understood that the farmer's cause of trouble was valid, but he had already been wronged for buying the factory. Now that he had to pay compensation, he was even more unhappy. Furthermore, the Tangshan River extended down for many miles and there were many households along the river. If they were to lose a dozen people today, others might come to the rescue the next day. They could send thousands or even tens of thousands of people at once. No amount of money would be enough to compensate for the losses. Even Bill Gates could make it look like Bill Gates couldn't open the lid of the pot. He definitely couldn't do this easily, especially since it was obvious that Chief Engineer Yang had suffered a setback at his place yesterday and had come back to make trouble. Deputy Commissioner Pang shook his head. No. I'm not asking Chief Chen to compensate me. This is not your problem. Then what do you mean? Deputy Commissioner Pang rubbed his hands. It's like this. Look, those people are still blocking the entrance of the Municipal Public Security Bureau. When I went back to explain to them, they started arguing with me again. They didn't listen to me and even went around saying that we are colluding with the government and businessmen. It's mainly because of the emissions from the Tangshan industrial plant, and I'm the scapegoat. Why don't you go with me? Show me the facts and evidence. It'll be more effective if you go. Qin Guang nodded. All right then. Let's go. Qin Guang did not drive himself. Instead, he sat in Deputy Commissioner Pang's car. On the way, Deputy Commissioner Pang secretly sent a text message to his friend in the Municipal Public Security Bureau. Those farmers who followed Chief Engineer Yang to cause trouble could be considered reasonable, but Chief Engineer Yang, who was kicked out of the door and dragged himself into the water, had to be punished for leading a crowd to cause trouble. On the other side, Chief Engineer Yang was sitting with his legs crossed at the gate of the Municipal Environmental Protection Bureau with a group of people. Of course, it was he who told Deputy Director Pang that a super-rich new boss had come to Tongshan Industrial Factory. He thought that it wouldn't be a problem to ask for a few $100,000 as compensation for the people he had dragged out today. Once he got the money, he would first put it in his pocket. As for those real farmers, he would just give them $3,000 each. Just based on Qin Guang's behavior yesterday, Chief Engineer Yang felt that Qin Guang would rather have less trouble than more trouble, so he gave him the money without hesitation. Chief Engineer Yang had never expected that Deputy Commissioner Pang not only knew Qin Guang, but he also knew a lot of secrets that ordinary people did not know. He had almost peed his pants. He hated Chief Engineer Yang to death. Not long after, Chief Engineer Yang saw Deputy Commissioner Pang's car return, so he hurried over. However, he looked up and saw Qin Guang's livid face, then Deputy Commissioner Pang. Chief Engineer Yang, you're quite interesting. Qin Guang looked at this guy with a fake smile. Chief Qin, what do you mean? Chief Engineer Yang retreated step by step, thinking of how Qin Guang smashed the table with his palm yesterday, and he panicked. On the other side, a few hot-tempered farmers did not know what was going on. They wanted to rush forward noisily, shouting the slogan that Chief Engineer Yang had taught them. Pay up. Profiteer. That's right, scum. Pay up. Qin Guang knew that these people were incited, so he could not be bothered to argue with them. He just looked straight at Chief Engineer Yang. You're so bold. Chief Engineer Yang was afraid, so he hurriedly turned around and told the others to settle down first. Deputy Commissioner Pang stood up again and said the same thing as before. President Xia had already paid the compensation that should have been paid. Even if he had to pay new compensation this year, he would have to wait until the report was released at the end of the year to slowly assess the losses. You're gathering people to cause trouble, and that's against the law. As soon as Deputy Commissioner Pang finished speaking, the police car arrived, and a group of people got out and handcuffed Chief Engineer Yang. Qin Guang patted Deputy Commissioner Pang on the shoulder. Everything is done according to the rules. Then he turned around to look at Chief Engineer Yang. I never intended to make things difficult for you. If you had been more responsible yesterday, you would still be receiving your bonus at the factory. You're the one who betrayed us, so don't blame others for your evil intentions. When Chief Engineer Yang heard that, his body went limp and he slid to the ground. He did not expect Qin Guang and Deputy Commissioner Pang to be so ruthless. The moment Chief Engineer Yang was arrested, the others panicked, especially the farmers who were dragged over. They all betrayed Chief Engineer Yang on the spot. Well, there was no need for additional evidence. There were witnesses at the scene, and with the law enforcement video, it was a standard confession. Malicious incitement and gathering people to cause trouble. The facts were irrefutable and Chief Engineer Yang could not deny it. After Chief Engineer Yang was taken away, the rest of the people felt relieved when they saw that they were not involved. However, they were not in a hurry to leave. They had finally met the person in question, and even if they did not dare to make a scene, they could still complain about their family situation and leave an impression. It would be good to have more compensation at the end of the year. Qin Guang wanted to go to the Tongshan River to take a look. He also wanted to know how much damage this unlucky factory had caused to Tongshan City. Therefore, he looked at the photos on the mobile phones of the farmers at the scene. He looked at the dead fish with their white bellies floating in the pond, the black rotten lotus roots that could be smelled through the screen, and the dried and yellow fruit trees along the river bank that did not bear fruit. He looked at the farmers' muddy eyes that were filled with poverty, and their skin that was cracked and yellow from working early in the morning. Coupled with their cowardly expressions and the shabby clothes on their bodies, Qin Guang felt miserable. It was really miserable. Although these things were not his fault, Qin Guang still felt heavy in his heart. Of course, they were easily bewitched by Chief Engineer Yang. After all, they were really miserable. All right. Everyone, don't crowd around Chief Qin. Chief Qin is very busy. Don't be in a hurry to complain to Chief Qin. At the end of the year, you should ask the people from the Tiansong Corporation for compensation. Deputy Chief Pang saw Qin Guang's solemn expression and thought that he was unhappy, so he quickly came over to help. Qin Guang silently covered his face. He could not remember how many times he had heard people sentence his Xia Guang environmental protection to death. His heart was stifled. I really have to thank you, Deputy Chief Pang. You've already put the blame on Tiansong in advance, huh? Should I thank you for saving me money? That's right. Then Chief Qin will be leaving first. Goodbye, Chief Qin. I'm going home. Sai, I'll have to borrow money from the villagers for my child's tuition this year. What's there to borrow? Who has the money to lend you? I hope Tiansong can give more. Otherwise we won't be able to live on. The rest of the farmers scattered like birds and beasts. Qin Guang turned to look at Deputy Chief Pang with a smile on his chubby face. Chief Qin, we've already spread the news that Tiansong wants to take over Tongshan industry. I'm not afraid that you'll be angry, Chief Qin. Really, the people of Tongshan City are really looking forward to their arrival. If you still have time, Chief Qin, why don't you take a walk with me along the riverbank? It's really too bitter. Qin Guang raised his eyebrows. You're afraid that I'll use my connections to stop Tiansong from coming? Have you ever thought that if that's the case, my 170 million will all go down the drain? Qin Guang still kept a straight face as he stared at Deputy Chief Pang. Deputy Chief Pang pinched the fat on his face. Chief Qin, I'm not a good official. Look at my stomach and you know that I like to eat and drink. But you don't know the situation in Tongshan River. Years. A whole 8 years. I used to be able to swim naked in Tongshan River when I was young. Now only crayfish can live in the water. I'm not afraid that you'll be angry. I sincerely hope that Tiansong will come. I'm really afraid that you'll stop this matter. If Xiaoguang Environmental Protection is still in charge, if Tongshan industry remains like this, it won't just be my problem in the future. It'll be the suffering of the millions of people in the city. Even if your money really goes down the drain, I really hope so. I became an official to make a living, but I really want to do something. These 8 years, the people of Tongshan City's Environmental Protection Department have been suffering too much. We feel terrible. Chapter 10:19. Deputy Director Pang looked like he was about to die a martyr's death, but the words that came out of his thick lips on his chubby face were filled with righteousness. If he wasn't a world-class acting master who could tell that this fatty wasn't acting and that he was speaking from the bottom of his heart, Qin Guang would have thought that he was deliberately lying to him. But now it seemed that even though this man had lost his edge in the system, and his hands weren't all that clean, he still had a sense of justice in his heart. Humans were always complicated, and there were rarely absolute good and evil people. Just like the corrupt official He Shin of the Qing dynasty. Even though he was extremely wealthy in a TV series, He Shin was still able to tell Ji Xiaolan an analysis of the corrupt and honest officials that he spoke of. No one was perfect and no one was perfect. Corrupt officials might be corrupt, but they could also be capable officials. If the water was too clear, there would be no fish. If all the corrupt officials in the world were strangled to death, and all the clean and honest officials were put in charge, order would still collapse and the people would still suffer. Corrupt officials and capable officials weren't opposites, and they usually coexisted. At least this Deputy Commissioner Pang was a capable official who could be corrupt, but also wanted to do something practical. He knew that he would offend Qin Guang in this regard, but he still dared to speak the truth, and expressed his hope that Tiansong would take over the responsibility to save Tongshan River. This was enough to prove his courage. Of course, Deputy Commissioner Pang was indeed impressive, because he could grasp Qin Guang's preferences and personality from the many trivial things he had heard about Qin Guang. As long as his starting point was for the sake of the people of Tongshan City and the devastated Tongshan River, even if Qin Guang would be unhappy, he wouldn't really take revenge on him. Instead, he would admire him. Deputy Commissioner Pang had a good grasp of the situation. Deputy Commissioner Pang, I really have to look at you in a different light. You flatter me. But I really don't want my money to go down the drain like this. Deputy Commissioner Pang's face stiffened. So, President Qin, do you have any way to solve the current situation where the emissions are not up to standard? Qin Guang shook his head. No. Then, on behalf of the people of Tongshan City, I beg you, President Qin, to be merciful and let us live. Qin Guang didn't answer his question. He only said, let's take a look around first. In this way, Deputy Bureau Chief Pang took Qin Guang down the Tongshan River Basin for 2 days. They even looked at the river basins of Yueshan City. When Qin Guang returned to the hotel, it was already past 10 o'clock the next night. His mood was indescribably heavy. Along the way, if he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he really couldn't imagine how much damage the Tongshan industrial factory had caused to this place. The river ecosystem had been completely destroyed. Several lakes along the way would erupt with cyanobacteria every July and August. The aquaculture industry of Tongshan City was almost completely destroyed. The most tragic were several villages that used to drink underground water along the river. The elderly who stayed behind suffered from various chronic diseases because of drinking water quality problems. There were even some children who were only a few years old who were disabled or deformed because of diseases they had when they were young. No matter how cold-hearted a person was, watching a 7 or 8-year-old child stretch out his deformed little hand that was only 3 to 4 inches long and as thin as 2 fingers to help his hunchbacked grandfather and grandmother clean up the dishes with difficulty, he would feel extremely sour in his heart. In recent years, because of the situation of the Tangshan industrial factory, the production of many enterprises in the industrial park had been greatly affected. At the most serious time, all of them had to stop production for rectification. However, the economy always had to develop. The industrial structure of the industrial park had been adjusted again and again. The pollution situation in the past 2 years had been much better than in the past. However, the most serious damage was caused in the first 2 years. At that time, the management was not as strict as it was now, and there were the most problems left. The teratogenicity and carcinogenicity had already occurred, and it was already irreversible. Chen Guang secretly clenched his fists when he remembered his original intention of choosing environmental science, a relatively unpopular subject, when he applied for university. Along the way, Deputy Commissioner Pang wiped his tears more than once. When Chen Guang looked at him, he awkwardly forced a smile and said, "I'm sorry to let you see such a joke, Mr. Chen. I've been to these villages many times in the past, and I always leave crying. Although the water supply in the villages is now widespread, some children can't go back because of their deformities." Before leaving, Chen Guang did not give Deputy Commissioner Pang a definite answer. Whether or not he could stop Tiansong, even if Deputy Commissioner Pang wanted to say something several times, but stopped himself. Chen Guang was very unwilling. He had never failed to do what he wanted to do. However, based on the current situation, it was obvious that letting the Tiansong Water Group take over was the best choice for everyone. He could use his connections to pressure Tiansong, and at least get some compensation to stop the losses. He did not need to invest more. With Tiansong Water's current strength, the entire Tangshan industrial plant should be able to handle at least 3 standards of discharge. However, Chen Guang felt that this was not what he wanted. Since he had seen these things and he had personally participated in it, he wanted to use his own strength to do something for this place. However, donating money to help those victims would not solve the problem, and the area affected was too large. Even with his current net worth, it would be a drop in the bucket. He did not want to admit and accept failure, and he did not want Song Ningyuan to be proud. However, he could not let Tangshan industrial plant continue to harm this river because of his own selfishness. Ever since he became an adult, he had rarely been in such a torturous situation. Then what should I do? Chen Guang fell asleep in a daze. In his sleep, he saw the dirty, black and smelly ditches with rotten mud floating on the surface and mosquitoes flying around. The old people and children with black spots on their faces and bent arms walked out of the dilapidated tile-roofed houses. The next morning when he arrived at the company, he was greeted by a group of uninvited guests. The project manager of Tiansong Water had brought a team to scout ahead of time. At first, Chen Guang did not intend to pay attention to this group of people, nor did he let Guoming pay attention to them. He arranged for a low-level employee to take this group of people around the factory. The people from Tiansong are too disrespectful. After all, this factory is still our Xia Guang Environmental Protection Company. What's the meaning of bringing a designer to take the measurements now? Guoming stood by the window of Chen Guang's office and looked down. Chen Guang shrugged. They're sure that we won't pass next week's inspection. But they can't be so arrogant. Guoming was very indignant. He used to work for Boss Ya, so he didn't feel like they were enemies. He took care of how much money he got. However, things were different now. The boss had changed to an old acquaintance, Chen Guang. Guoming couldn't help but feel indignant for Chen Guang. Chen Guang curled his lips. What can we do? Beat them up? If it had been the day before yesterday, he might have had this idea. At the very least, he would have blocked all the people from Tiansong at the door. However, after visiting the Tangshan River area the day before yesterday, Chen Guang himself was quite confused and wavering. Until now, he hadn't been able to make up his mind. He didn't want to admit defeat, so he had to use his connections to deceive everyone. If he wanted to live up to his conscience, he had to use funds from the Qingguang Group, at least 300 million yuan to fill this hole. Coupled with the 170 million yuan that Luli had lost before, it meant that he would have to spend 500 million yuan to do this. Even if he passed the inspection smoothly and the rebuilt Tangshan industrial factory could meet the standards and continue to collect sewage fees for the remaining 12 years, it would be almost impossible to recover the cost. For him, it would be a complete failure if he couldn't make money. In a sense, from the moment he got involved in this matter, he had already lost. No matter how unwilling he was, he knew rationally that the best choice was to stop here, hand over the factory to Tiansong Water Group, and ask for some transfer fees. This was the optimal decision. The people from Tiansong Water Group were busy in the factory all day. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they still found Guoming. From the beginning, Qin Guang had been wearing a wide-brimmed hat and hiding in the crowd behind Guoming. He covered his face and pretended to be a young employee of the factory. Coupled with his casual attire that was rich with the smell of a student, he did look quite like one. "Manager Guo, why don't you take an early leave from tomorrow onwards? Isn't it a waste of time for you to stay here now? During the review next week you can just go through the motions and put on an act, right?" Xiaoyu, the leader of the Tiansong Water Group who was in charge of this matter, went straight to the point as soon as he entered the door. He was a little arrogant and proud. Guoming quietly turned his head to look at Qin Guang, who had lowered the brim of his hat, and squeezed out an ugly smile on his face. "Manager Xia, you must be joking. Our director Qin just said a few days ago that we have to stand up for the last shift." "Stand up for what last shift? It's already like this. There's not much to hope for that director Qin of yours. He's someone who could still buy Xia Guang at this time. If he says something you don't like, there's no other explanation other than that he has a screw loose in his head." Xiaoyu waved his hands rather impatiently, before raising his brows at the designers and engineering team behind him. Clearly, Xiaoyu knew that Xia Guang's new boss was surnamed Qin, but had not known that it was Qin Guang. The somewhat two-faced deputy director Pang probably hadn't warned him in advance. Hearing that Qin Guang was being scolded again, Guoming sneaked a look at Qin Guang. Still not seeing his expression, he began to worry for Xiaoyu's safety. "I hope you'll still be able to walk out later." A man with gold-rimmed spectacles who looked like an engineer walked out from behind Xiaoyu, spreading out a map in his hands and placing it on the desk. Manager Guo, it's actually like this. We've also taken into consideration the special circumstances of the Tongshan factory, and the tasks given to us by the higher-ups are also very tight. Once we take over, we'll have to come up with a rectification plan as soon as possible. As soon as we start work here, the enterprises in the industrial park will have to build their own water storage tanks, or they'll have to close down and reorganize. Our Tiansong factory will have to resume operations in 6 months at most, and meet the discharge standards. Chapter 10:20. Xiaoyu said again, "Yes, so we hope to start the transformation as soon as possible. Just 1 day earlier you can get rid of this mess as soon as possible, and the people of Tongshan can get rid of the misery as soon as possible." The designer pointed to the drawings on the table and said, "This is the current floor plan of our Tongshan industrial factory. We have completed the design plan. The only pawns that can be used in this drawing are these stabilization pawns. We will transform them into accident pawns. Other pawns such as grill tanks, USB pawns, aerobic pawns, sedimentation pawns, and even sand filters, were not designed in accordance with the regulations. All of them have to be overturned and rebuilt. It's a lot of work." A dark-skinned, strong middle-aged man stood up next to him. He should be the manager of the site construction. He said, "Considering such a large amount of work and time is so tight, we hope to enter the site tomorrow and demolish some structures that can be demolished at present." Xiaoyu patted Guoming on the shoulder. "Old Guo, I didn't mean anything by asking you to take a vacation. It's just that time is tight. Anyway, your new boss is not in charge. You have the final say here. Can you make an exception and we'll bring the excavator in tomorrow?" Well, after going around in a big circle, Guoming and Qin Guang finally understood the intention of Tiansong sending manager Xia. There were still 4 days before the inspection. Even if the inspection couldn't be passed, it would probably take another 10 days or half a month for the two sides to complete the handover. But they couldn't wait to start the construction ahead of time. Anyway, everyone was sure that Xia Guanghuo would die. It didn't matter if he died early or late. In a sense, their thoughts were right. If it was still Boss Xia in charge, he probably wouldn't object, and Guoming wouldn't have any objections. But now that Qin Guang was sitting behind him, Guoming couldn't figure out what Qin Guang was thinking, so he couldn't express his opinion at will. Qin Guang finally got up. Guoming was a little relieved and turned to look at him eagerly. Anyway, he had the final say. Qin Guang took off his hat and looked up at Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu didn't notice the young man at first. He was shocked when he suddenly stood up while the adults were talking about business. Just as he was about to scold Qin Guang, he saw Guoming looking at Qin Guang respectfully and saying, "Mr. Qin, what do you think of this matter?" Xiaoyu immediately reacted, inwardly cursing Xia Guang for how black-bellied and sinister this new boss of his was. He had been here all along, but had actually been silently hiding by the side pretending to be an employee. Did I accidentally offend someone? Xie Yu carefully looked at Qin Guang's face and smiled apologetically. Regardless of whether the other party was really stupid or not, he was still a tycoon who could fork out 170 million from his pocket to buy Summer Light environmental protection. It was best not to offend him easily. Wait, who is this person? Why did his face look so familiar? I seem to have seen it in the entertainment news before. You know me? Qin Guang asked first. Xie Yu reacted quickly. Qin Guang. Qin Guang nodded. Yes, it's me. Xie Yu suddenly came to a realization. No wonder he was so stupid. He was wasting money for nothing. In the end, he wasn't even in the industry. I say, as an internet celebrity, you should just properly be a celebrity. What's the point of coming to the environmental protection industry to pretend to be a capable person? The microorganisms and pollutants in the water can still give you face. Don't tell me they don't grow? An ignorant and incompetent celebrity like you doesn't know anything. See, you've made a fool of yourself, haven't you? Although he was secretly laughing in his heart, Xie Yu did not show any disdain on his face. He just laughed it off. Director Qin, I didn't mean it that way just now. I was just thinking. Qin Guang first grinned before his face hardened and he pointed outside the door. Scram. Ugh. Xie Yu and the others had not expected Qin Guang to turn hostile just like that. He still wanted to struggle. Director Qin, look at this. Qin Guang snorted through his nose. You don't understand human language, do you? I have a screw loose in my head, so I have a bad temper. It wouldn't be good if I hurt you. What are you being so cocky for? The Tan construction manager was about to fly into a rage when Xie Yu hurriedly stopped him. Qin Guang looked at him through Xie Yu. Yo, you're not convinced? Your hands are itchy? Wanna practice? Xie Yu hurriedly whispered into the guy's ear, behave yourself. Don't think that Qin Guang is tall. He's the champion of the international arm wrestling competition. He can paste you into the wall with one punch. The tan middle-aged man immediately gave in. After much difficulty, the situation settled down. Xie Yu turned around and wanted to argue again, but Qin Guang glared at him. I'll say it one last time. Scram. Xie Yu saw that he could not come to an agreement, so he had no choice but to leave with his men. After everyone left, Guoming was still very angry. We haven't even finished yet and they're already tearing down our wall. This is too much. Qin Guang sighed. There's nothing we can do about it. We have to be strong to forge iron. If we can't meet the standards, then we can't meet the standards. Who knows how that manager Xie will slander me when he gets out. D***MN. Forget it, let's not think about this. Olgua, I'm going out for a walk to get some fresh air. My heart is very stuffy. Qin Guang waved his hand, picked up his cup and drank some water. Then he shook his head and walked out. Sitting on the edge of the aerobic pool, Qin Guang felt melancholy as he looked at the floating black mud and white foam. Smelling the strange rotting smell, Qin Guang felt melancholic in his heart. Sometimes he really wished that he was a bad person. How bad could he be? So bad that he was completely unreasonable. Even if the emperor came, he would not give him face. So bad that he would not feel heartache when he saw a complete stranger living a miserable life. So bad that he would not lose out since he had spent the money. Even if he had to go against his conscience, he had to let the review team approve it. So bad that the drainage would still not meet the standards for another 12 years, and they would still collect sewage fees if they did not rectify it. With his current relationship with the elders, and the arrogance of the underlings in the Guangdong General Headquarters, if he really wanted to be unreasonable, no one would be able to do anything about it. But he could not do it. He was still a good person deep down. Polluting the environment was equivalent to poisoning others, and hundreds of thousands of people at once. If he really did that, he would be a ruthless butcher who had slaughtered more people than Bai Qi. Although the people from Tiansong were annoying, Song Ningyuan was even more annoying. But it could not be denied that their people were really capable. Over the past few days, Qin Guang had looked through quite a bit of information regarding the Tiansong water utility. Putting aside Song Ningyuan, who was the representative of the Song family, the reason why the Tiansong water utility could rise in the country in recent years was due to their standards. Tiansong water had solved many difficult and complicated diseases all over the country, from soil and water restoration to super difficult wastewater treatment, and so on. They worked closely with many universities both at home and abroad. They had a large team of more than 50 top experts, many of whom were well-known masters both at home and abroad. They were well-funded and had a strong technical background. They were fully deserving of being the leading enterprise in the country. Although they made a lot of money, they had also contributed a lot to promoting environmental protection. In addition, although manager Xia was very arrogant and annoying today, he was not arrogant without any support. However, he wasn't being arrogant without any backing. Instead, he was being arrogant because he had the confidence and reason to do so. Since Xia Guang environmental protection could not be saved, there was nothing wrong with the early demolition. What annoyed Qin Guang the most was that he felt he had become the villain, the stumbling block in front of justice. It was just like what the fat deputy bureau chief Pang had said the day before yesterday. Giving up himself was the only way to benefit the people. What kind of bad luck was this? Hey, business is not good, right? He was in a daze when he heard a clear and familiar voice behind him. He turned around and shouted in surprise, "Sister Lu Fei, why are you here?" Lu Fei ran to his side and sat down. She did not care that the floor was dirty. Speaking of which, it's a coincidence. Here, Dalu chemical. Do you see it? I see it. What? Lu Fei shrugged. You still don't know? Qin Guang suddenly understood. Your family? Lu Fei nodded. It's my family's, but my cousin is in charge of it. I didn't even know about this. I only found out about it when he came back to Wujing to have a chat with us yesterday. He told me about it as a joke. Qin Guang was stunned. But many people knew that Xia Guang's new boss was Qin Guang, but they were not sure that it was me, Qin Guang. How did you know it was me? Lu Fei chuckled and pointed at her head. 6 cents. Have you forgotten? I told you before that I'm an intuitive businessman. Qin Guang sighed in admiration. You're awesome, my sister. Lu Fei patted his head again. Besides, no matter how many people are called Qin Guang in this world, who else but you can be so rich and so stupid? With this movement, Lu Fei's tight-fitting black leather clothes wrapped around her body, revealing every detail of her body. Qin Guang swallowed his saliva inwardly. After not seeing her for a long time, Sister Lu Fei's figure was still as hot as ever. Even though it was now late autumn and winter was fast approaching, she was no longer wearing those thin leather clothes of the past, but she still looked curvaceous in all the right places. Qin Guang could not be blamed for his lack of willpower. After all, his relationship with Lu Fei was not ordinary. What was the saying again? A merchant girl does not know the hatred of a fallen nation, but sings from across the river what flowers will follow. Not only did Lu Fei not feel uncomfortable with his seductive gaze, she instead puffed out her chest proudly before turning back to look at him. How is it? Do you like it? Qin Guang's throat rumbled repeatedly. I like it. Do you want to touch it? Yes. Here? Lu Fei patted his head again. Dream on. You were sitting here sighing all by yourself just now, looking like you've aged 10 years. Now you're thinking about all this nonsense again. Qin Guang drooped his head. Sigh, you're right. Sister Lu Fei, what do you think I should do? Lu Fei hugged her knees and turned to look at him. Don't worry, tell me slowly. Let's think of a solution together. It had to be said that Lu Fei came at the right time. In the past few days, Qin Guang was really full of bitterness and had no one to talk to. He had found the right person to tell Lu Fei about the troubles of the business world. Over there was the Lu family's Dalu chemical industry. Lu's chemical industry was a super-large chemical group in Dachuan province. As an entrepreneur over the years, Lu Fei had dealt with environmental-related issues. Lu Fei's sense of responsibility as an entrepreneur, her understanding and consideration of profit and environmental protection, and even her understanding of Tiansong water was much deeper than Qin Guang, who had entered the industry less than a week ago. Unknowingly, the two of them sat by the pool and talked until it was nearly 9 o'clock at night. Chapter 10:21. Perhaps it was because he had seen and thought too much in the past few days, Qin Guang had a lot of thoughts in his mind. It was rare for him to talk to someone so much in one breath. Looking up at the moon in the sky, Qin Guang patted Lu Fei, who was leaning on his shoulder. I'm sorry, Sister Lu Fei, I didn't expect to become a chatterbox. Lu Fei comfortably moved her head to make her posture more comfortable. What's there to be embarrassed about? Didn't I come here to listen to you? Well, now that you know the situation, what would you do if you encountered this situation? Although Qin Guang had lived for a long time and it seemed that his Qinguang group was doing well, as a businessman or entrepreneur, he really didn't have any reliable experience. Lu Fei looked up at the moon in the sky. From a pure businessman's point of view, I suggest you make a prompt decision and give up if it doesn't work. Qin Guang stared. Huh? Is that so? I don't want to give up. Lu Fei chuckled. Listen to me first. I'm not just thinking from your point of view. Although Dalu Chemical is not the main part of our group, its annual output is also more than 1 billion. If the Tangshan industrial plant situation causes it to stop production, my family will lose hundreds of millions of yuan a year. If you ask me for my opinion, I definitely hope that you just let it go and don't affect Dalu Chemical. Qin Guang was really speechless. So that's what you think? Lu Fei smiled. Of course. That's all my family's money. But I have to tell you another reason: the current you is not the previous you. What do you mean? In the past, you were just an ordinary student. Whatever decision you made, it was only your business and it couldn't affect others. But now you're different. In addition to your identity as the boss of Tianguang Group, you also have a high status in the government. Your identity is extraordinary. Your every word and action, a seemingly simple decision, a small decision in this country would affect the entire country. Just like this time, your decision will affect millions of people in Tangshan City. It will also affect dozens of companies in the same industrial park, involving an annual output of tens of billions. This was not just a matter of money, but also the livelihood of many people. Tens of thousands of families could be changed because of one decision. It's just like the butterfly effect, not to mention that you're a golden-winged rock soaring in the sky. Qin Guang stared blankly for a moment before his head drooped again. Of course I understand what you're talking about. This is also what I'm worried about. The day before yesterday, Deputy Director Pang of the Tangshan Environmental Protection Bureau also said something similar to you. Lu Fei nodded. Yeah, you can't be so selfish. Qin Guang grunted. I understand, but I'm not happy that Song Ningyuan took advantage of me. His voice was low and Ruffy could hear his disappointment. Lu Fei had known Qin Guang for a long time. She knew his character very well. He looked very easygoing, but he was very stubborn and arrogant. He had to make such a huge sacrifice, and the one who benefited was someone he didn't like. It was really too much to ask of him. However, it's not like there's no other way. Qin Guang, what other way is there? If you're determined to do it, then we can think of a way together. Lu Group Chemical has been in contact with environmental protection for so many years. We are also very knowledgeable about industrial wastewater. We even set up a subsidiary company related to sewage treatment a few years ago. Although the scale is not as large as Tiansong Water, we can also hire very top experts. I can make the decision to let the water company under the Lu Group intervene in the Tangshan industrial plant. We will jointly inject capital, jointly control the shares, and do this together. In this way, you don't have to bear the funds for the reconstruction of the Tangshan industrial plant alone. In addition, although the previous contract for the Tangshan industrial plant was 20 years of management rights, it has been 8 years now. But considering the special situation of this plant, and the influence of you and my family in China, we can both intervene at the same time and take over the loss-making enterprises that could not meet the standards before. We can restart the negotiation of the operating period and talk back to 20 years or even more. Qin Guang's eyes gradually lit up. He thought that he really had little experience in this area. Before, he only had the remaining 12 years in his mind. He didn't expect that he would take over such a mess. If he could really save it and increase the investment, there was no reason to continue to insist that there were only 12 years left. He said happily, "That's a way. But it's not good to let your family spend money." Lu Fei rolled her eyes. "In your dreams. I'm also doing this for the good of Dalu Chemical. I don't want to drag you down. If Lu Group wants to invest 200 million, you still have to support 200 million. It doesn't matter to me personally, but I still have to answer to my family, so the controlling stake of Lu Group must not be less than 40%. At that time, Tangshan Industrial Plant will have a stable annual profit of 40 to 60 million. If we operate together for 20 years, there will still be some profits. You're really good at business. You're not willing to lose even a penny. Of course, Lu Group is not my property alone. I have to be responsible for my uncles. However, this was the last resort. After all, even so, it means that almost all of your 170 million before will be wasted. It's a pity." Qin Guang laughed, and his thoughts were much smoother. If the money is gone, then it's gone. I can't bring it with me when I'm dead. I can earn it again if it's gone. It's not like I'm losing money. I can earn it back slowly. According to the current situation, as long as it is rebuilt, Dalu will still be affected. The reservoir built over there can only be used for 3 months at most. I'm afraid it will have to stop production for more than 3 months. Alas. Qin Guang shrugged. It's not my fault. Lu Fei slapped his thigh. Aren't you a Grand Magister? Why don't you set up a more powerful magic array below and make the pollutants disappear? Qin Guang pinched her waist. You really dare to think? Even a magister has to follow the basic rules. Besides, the pollutants are all dissolved in the water. I'm an Earth Grand Magister, not a Sewage Grand Magister. How embarrassing. There are also things that the great Rai Qin can't do. Lu Fei giggled as he pinched her waist, but she still didn't forget to tease him. As she said this, Lu Fei's mind reappeared with Qin Guang's ability to destroy heaven and earth in the Dolua world. It was a rather unique feeling. A godlike magister who could destroy the heavens with one hand in another world was actually troubled by a mere sewage treatment station in this world. Just thinking about it was interesting. You're still talking. I must let you know how powerful I am. Lu Fei was someone who knew that she had magic abilities. It was rare for Qin Guang to be especially open with her. His hands didn't stop moving, desperately scratching her armpits. Lu Fei wanted to struggle, but it was to no avail. Very soon she was trembling from Qin Guang's scratches. Her face and ears were red, and her whole body went limp as she lay on his body. She didn't know if it was because of embarrassment or because of the tickle. No, I'm not coming. You brat, are you trying to torture me to death? Lu Fei panted heavily. Her body was limp and she didn't have any strength at all. Unknowingly, Qin Guang's hand wasn't placed under her armpits, but was firmly grasping her chest. Even through the leather clothes he could still feel the perky and elastic inside. Qin Guang's hand reluctantly rested on top. He couldn't bear to take it away. His right hand was holding her waist, and his left hand on her chest began to increase strength bit by bit. What? Naughty brat, you don't have anything pressing on your heart, so you're not being honest? Under the moonlight, Lu Fei looked up at Qin Guang with her seductive eyes. It was rare to see Qin Guang. Since she was here today, she didn't think of leaving. However, she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to talk business after a fierce battle, so she waited until after the conversation was over before she began to let herself go. Of course, she didn't expect to choose this place as the battlefield. She felt a little uncomfortable and shy in her heart. At this time, no one passed by the pool, but after all, they were outside, so she only felt particularly nervous and excited. Qin Guang coughed lightly. Yes. No one will see us, right? No, you know what I'm capable of. As long as I release my spiritual power, I can wake up if anyone passes by within 100 meters. Well, this time I'll give you a reward just like when you raced before. Didn't I say that as long as you win one game I'll give you more? Then why are you rewarding me this time? Lu Fei smiled and put her mouth close to his ear. She whispered, I'm rewarding you. Even if your status is different, even if you can cover the sky with one hand, you didn't think of doing that. You didn't become the kind of person I don't want to see. You're still the Qin Guang I've always known. This makes me very gratified and proud. Qin Guang suddenly understood. Is this called not forgetting my original intention? Lu Fei smiled. Maybe if others knew about you they would laugh at your indecisiveness, but in my opinion, this is a performance of responsibility. Qin Guang blushed. I've praised you so much that I'm about to go to heaven. Then, hurry up and let me go to heaven too. The bright moon was still hanging high in the sky. At the side of the aerobic pool in the Tongshan Industrial Park sewage treatment plant, a dull moan could be heard from time to time. The so-called spinning a cocoon around oneself, also known as moth flying into the fire, described Lu Fei's situation. Since the last time, she had also learned her lesson and worked hard to make her combat power stronger. She even bought a lot of unspeakable equipment for this, which was no different from what Jiang Yage had done. It was also for this reason that she was so easily aroused by Qin Guang's ticklish hand today and couldn't control herself. Although she felt extremely nervous and shy, and even had goosebumps because of the moonlight shining on her skin, she still chose this open-air place with Qin Guang regardless of her own safety. But unfortunately, there was always an insurmountable gap between man and God. 40 seconds. In less than a minute, her hand holding the railing next to the aerobic pool completely drooped down. Her eyes rolled back and her whole body shrunk down like mud. If it weren't for Qin Guang holding her tightly from behind, she would have directly fallen into the pool. After waiting for more than 10 minutes, Qin Guang took a deep breath and fed Lu Fei cold water from the Tongtian Holy Grail. Only then did she catch her breath and slowly open her eyes. She looked at Qin Guang with a rather resentful look. Can't you be a little more gentle? Qin Guang was also very distressed. I didn't want to. Help me up. What's wrong? Lu Fei turned around and slapped his thigh. I can still fight. Chapter 1022. Again? What else? Are you going to spend the night like this? Lu Fei pointed at the invincible silver spear that he was still holding. But you can't do it anymore. Lu Fei held the railing again, bent down, turned her back to Qin Guang and twisted her waist. The old way, let's carry out plan B. Ah? The lubricant is in my bag. I bought it from an adult store with my face covered before coming here. It's so embarrassing. Hurry, hurry. Oh, okay. Qin Guang didn't expect her to be so well prepared. Another hour passed. Qin Guang rolled his eyes, suddenly feeling that life was dull, everything in life was just a passing cloud, and his heart was solemn. Lu Fei turned around and scolded, "Can you step back a little? My stomach is full of anger." Qin Guang hurriedly took a step back. There was a pop. Then there was a thump from the pool. Qin Guang didn't know what was going on at first. He only cared about helping Lu Fei and didn't take it seriously. Bastard. Qin Guang, you bastard who only cares about the opposite sex. Liuli's angry roar sounded in his heart. Qin Guang was at a loss. He didn't know what was going on. Did Liuli take the wrong medicine today? This wasn't the first time the old man did something bad. Why was she reacting so strongly? You idiot. When you stepped back, you kicked the Holy Grail into the sewage pool. Are you trying to suffocate me to death? Can you be any worse? Quickly jump down and save me. Hearing those words, Qin Guang was instantly shocked. No wonder he felt like he kicked something with his toes. He didn't expect it to be his heavenly Holy Grail. Then he was overjoyed. Retribution. Serves you right for wasting money and tricking me into coming to this broken factory. I should let you taste the smell of sewage. You want me to jump into the sewage pool to save you? Save it? No way. Of course, Qin Guang was not stupid enough to dive into the aerobic pool. No matter how good he was at swimming, he could not stand the smell inside. Besides, he and Lu Fei were still naked at the edge of the pool, so he had to put on his clothes first. Qin Guang, what happened? Lu Fei turned around with great difficulty. She hugged Qin Guang and subconsciously clamped her legs together. Qin Guang waved his hand casually. It's nothing. It's just a small problem. Don't worry about the details. Come, Sister Lu Fei, let me wipe you and then put on your clothes. Are you cold? Lu Fei covered her mouth. I'm not cold at all when I'm beside you. Qin Guang took out a tissue from Lu Fei's bag and bent down to wipe her from behind. He couldn't help but feel proud. Of course she wouldn't feel cold. As far as the eye could see, who else in this world could be like him, extravagantly spreading his inner strength outside his body to resist the cold wind? Small problem? Details? Why don't you tell me again? Hurry up. Why don't you try to dawdle a little longer? Did you eat a bear's heart and a leopard's gall? Hurry up and save me. Don't regret it. While Qin Guang and Lu Fei were putting on their clothes, Liuli's roar did not stop for even a second. Even if one used their toes to think, they could guess how furious she was right now. However, Qin Guang was like a dead pig that was not afraid of boiling water. Last time, Liuli blew him up so badly, but she only beat him up. This time he was just taking a dirty bath, so it was nothing. Anyway, I won't be beaten to death. He also felt that Liuli was deliberately taking revenge on him and wanted to drag him into the water. I won't be fooled so easily. I'm not stupid. When we were in Mount Baylor, the Holy Grail flew over by itself. This time you can still fly out by yourself after falling into the sewage pool. At most he could just coax her later. 10 minutes later, he and Lu Fei finally put on their clothes. In his mind, Liuli's rage gradually calmed down. Her roar gradually became weak, and her voice became softer and softer. Qin Guang began to panic. He tried to communicate with Liuli in his mind. Liuli? Liuli-chan. Lord Liuli? What the hell? Don't scare me. However, there was no movement. Qin Guang felt that things were not good. Could it be that he had overplayed with fire and killed someone? Oh no, a god? Impossible, you're a god. How could this little stench make you faint? Qin Guang. Look at what you've done. This time it was Deer Cry's roar again. I didn't do anything. What's going on? Can't Liuli make the cup fly by itself? Qin Guang simply could not understand. Deer Cry shouted in exasperation. Of course it's not a problem normally, but Sister Liuli has consumed too much of her divine power recently. At most she can make the cup shake a little. It's impossible for her to make the Holy Grail fly out directly. She hasn't done anything recently, has she? Do you think everyone is as heartless as you? Recently, Sister Liuli has not stopped using her divine power to deduce. Qin Guang was puzzled. Deduce what? Deduce why the power of the heavenly Holy Grail is leaking. Deduce why the real world is constantly merging with your real world. Deduce how long it will take for the elemental power in your real world to be completely out of control. Deduce what kind of situation is this. Deduce how your real world will be changed if the current situation continues to develop. Qin Guang was speechless. He realized that he had blamed Liuli wrongly. Although Liuli always liked to say things like, "Good luck, I don't know, and we'll cross the bridge when we get to it," but seeing that he was so anxious, she had actually done a lot of things in secret. "Sister Liuli and I are so unlucky to meet you. We must have taken the wrong medicine to accompany you in your madness. Your unlucky cup is really not reliable at all." Dear Cry continued to complain. "I'm sorry, I was wrong." Qin Guang was ashamed by Dear Cry's words. "I'll think of a way now. You'd better hurry. Sister Liuli has already fainted." "Fainted from the stench?" "No, she fainted from anger because of you. But wait a little longer. When the divine power barrier outside her is exhausted, the smell of your foul sewage will drift over. According to what you guys said, after a single molecule drifts into her nose, you might have the chance to feel the most terrifying wrath of God so far. You don't know, but Sister Liuli is actually a germaphobe. It's very serious, so serious that it's almost perverted." Qin Guang suddenly understood. No wonder Liuli would be so furious and out of control after the cup fell into the water. So there was such a thing. He had seen what a germaphobe was like on television. He didn't want to experience what a god with a germaphobe was like. "Is there a situation? Did your phone fall in just now? I'll just buy another one later." Lu Fei, who had tidied up her clothes and was still feeling a little weak, asked subconsciously when she saw Qin Guang staring at the water. Qin Guang shook his head. "It's not a phone." "Then what is it?" "My cup. You'll remember it." Lu Fei remembered. Back in Utopia, Qin Guang had asked her and Xan Qin to put the cup on the communication base station to open up a channel to another world. That cup must be very important. "Oh my God, what should we do now?" Qin Guang had a bitter expression. "Now that things have come to this, I can only jump in and fish it out." It doesn't stink?" Lu Fei subconsciously wanted to hide to the side. "Of course it stinks, but I can't do anything about it. The problem is very serious and the situation is very serious." A minute later he stood by the pool and posed for a long time, but he didn't have the courage to take a leap of faith. "This concubine can't do it." "Can't you control the soil? There's mud in it, right? Why don't you try to wrap the cup in mud?" Lu Fei, who was beside him, saw that he was really shy and suggested. Qin Guang shook his head. "It won't work. I tried it 2 days ago. On one hand, the pollutants in the water are dissolved in the water. On the other hand, even if there is some mud, it's really not much. It's also very scattered, and it's also affected by the flow of water. The elemental power in it is too thin, and it's very difficult to control." As he spoke, he casually raised his hand and tried it. A second later, the holy cup floated to the surface of the water. What's going on?" Looking at this scene, Qin Guang's mind was filled with confusion. Did the old man's earth explosion superpower get stronger again? Why is it so useful? Isn't it very useful? Lu Fei didn't mind that it was dirty. She bent down to take the cup in her hand, shook off the dirty water in it, and then shook it. "This is your precious baby." Only then did Qin Guang react. What the hell? Why was the concentration of the elements in the pool at this moment at least several times higher than usual? It was almost close to the concentration when the wolves in Kainan province mutated a few days ago. The earth explosion superpower could be manipulated with ease, and there was no feeling of sluggishness. It wasn't until he ran to the laboratory to wash the cup clean and put it back into his bag that he finally understood the key point. All along he had neglected a very important thing. The world in the cup, in a sense, was actually the space inside the cup. With the mouth of the heavenly Holy Grail as the dividing line, it seemed to be in the same world, but in fact, the inside and outside of the mouth of the cup were clearly two different worlds. Before the real world and the real world began to merge, the invisible plane barrier on the mouth of the heavenly Holy Grail could seal the power of the Holy Grail very well. Even if there was a slight leakage, it wouldn't have much impact. It could even be understood that there was a layer of one-way filter on the mouth of the cup. When he drank water, only water could pass through, but the power of the Holy Grail was blocked inside the cup. But as the real world was changing bit by bit recently, the passage of the barrier between the planes became stronger, and the power of the Holy Grail leaked out from the Holy Grail even more. This time, when the cup fell directly into the water, it was equivalent to the water from the outside world continuously passing through the mouth of the cup, bringing out more of the power of the Holy Grail from inside. Although this power would quickly disperse to all parts of the world, at least the power of the Holy Grail in the pool would always be more concentrated than in other places. In the past, he had experienced the same phenomenon when he drank water. What he drank seemed to be ordinary tea leaves, but was actually holy water that contained an abundance of the power of the Holy Grail. Unknowingly, it strengthened the special ability of the Lord of the Holy Grail, the Mother Earth explosion, bit by bit. But he was already so used to it that he was numb to it, and often took the initiative to absorb the earth elemental power that leaked out so he didn't notice it. Once he understood this, Qin Guang had a burst of inspiration and was overjoyed. He stomped his feet and turned around to hug Lu Fei, kissing her happily and shouting, "I got it." Beside him, Lu Fei was shocked and touched her stomach. It can't be so fast, right? And although you did Bayubiu just now, the position that you went in was also wrong." As she spoke, she subconsciously clamped her buttocks together. "You can get it like this? This isn't scientific." Qin Guang also knew that he said something wrong and made Lu Fei think the wrong way. He scratched his head in embarrassment. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about my idea to settle the investigation in 2 days. Chapter 1023. That's impossible. You can't do it at all, no one can do it. Even knowing that Qin Guang was a magister, Lu Fei didn't believe what he said. After all, he had just said it himself. Even a grand magister had to follow the basic rules, right? Qin Guang chuckled. No, I just made a new discovery. I won't explain it to you first. You'll naturally understand when you see it. Not caring that it was already past 10, Qin Guang directly took out his phone and called Guoming, asking him to buy medicine first. All kinds of additives, flocculants, and precipitants such as PAC and PM were to be bought as much as possible. Get more lime and some sulfuric acid. Even though Guoming felt it was strange, he still followed Qin Guang's instructions after hanging up, hurriedly contacting suppliers overnight. He remembered the last words that Qin Guang threw down. Our entire sewage treatment station has more than 100,000 cubic meters of water. It's a lot and we need it urgently. Don't be afraid of spending money. Throw money like crazy and get people to transport it back as soon as possible. It's best if it's tomorrow but no later than noon the day after tomorrow. Don't worry about money. Xia Guang has no money now but I still have some savings. Tens of millions or even tens of millions won't be a problem. With Qin Guang's imperial sword in hand, although Guoming didn't know his purpose, after being depressed for more than half a year in the Tongshan industrial factory, he finally experienced the feeling of being a sugar daddy throwing money around. He felt indescribably refreshed, only feeling rich and overbearing. After busying himself for most of the night, he finally finalized the matter at 3 in the morning. Guoming used a calculator to calculate how much money he had spent tonight. Roughly calculating, he had spent more than 1 million. He secretly clicked his tongue, wondering if he had been a little too presumptuous. On the other side, Qin Guang began to stir on the spot. He didn't do anything else. He just made a crane arm and hung the cup in front of the grill of the water inlet. Then he took a water hose from the side, stuffed it into the cup and poured water into the grill, letting the water overflow from the cup into the grill. Lu Fei didn't understand what was going on, and Qin Guang couldn't explain it to her. His plan was very simple. First, he would use this stupid method to increase the concentration of the elemental energy in the entire water body of the wastewater treatment plant. Then, before the inspection team arrived, he would wait for a few hours, leaving enough time for them to react. Then he would throw all the precipitation-forming drugs into the wastewater treatment plant. When the people from the inspection team came to take samples, he would go all out and use his earth burner ability to suppress all the mud to the bottom of the pool. It might not be able to make the water in the entire pool clear and cool, but it would definitely pass the inspection. As for the final problem of discharging the mud, that would have to be done slowly. By doing this, it was a little like trying to deceive everyone and muddle through. However, after listening to Lu Fei's idea, Qin Guang felt that there was nothing wrong with what he did. Passing the inspection first would give the factory a few more months. Later, he could immediately cooperate with the water company of Lu Chemical and immediately start the rectification. It would only be a few days slower than handing it over to the Tiansong Water Company. Even if in the end he felt that he was at a disadvantage after the inspection, as long as Tiansong Song Ningyuan didn't ask for a beating like his pretentious manager Xia, humbly begging him, then he could be merciful and give the factory to them. After fighting for a few months of buffer time and transferring it to Tiansong, it would be more reasonable when extorting compensation. At that time, at least he would be able to hold on to his face, and his heart would feel more comfortable. No matter how he looked at it, passing the inspection team was the most important thing. In fact, the same effect could be achieved by Qin Guang directly selling a favor and asking people to help him falsify the inspection. However, the review team came directly from the central government, so he had to at least sell a favor to Wuxian. Secretary Ma was a person of high status, and it was very likely that he would have to beg those old men whom he disliked. Compared to selling a favor, he was more willing to spend his own money. A problem that could be solved with money was not a big problem. Of course, in the depths of Qin Guang's heart, what he hoped most was to make a breakthrough in technology. He could carry out the lowest cost transformation on the current basis of Tangshan industrial plant, and then operate it in a dignified manner. In this way he could live up to his conscience, the people of Tangshan City, and his wallet. That was killing two birds with one stone, and he would have a clear conscience. In addition, if he could take this opportunity to force himself to achieve results in technology in the long run, it would also be a great cause to benefit the common people. As Lu Fei said, his every word and action now would lead to too many things. It was better to leave more wealth for the world than to bring disaster to the common people. However, there were only 3 days before the inspection. It was impossible to make a technological breakthrough. If he fought for a few more months, at least he would have another chance to choose. What he lacked the most now was time. Lu Fei and Qin Guang moved their own chairs and sat next to the water inlet. She lazily shrunk her shoulders and leaned against Qin Guang. You're planning to solve the problem by adding medicine, right? This is a bit fake. Qin Guang was embarrassed by her words. Yes. But I don't think it's a big deal. It's not your fault that Tangshan industrial plant didn't meet the standards. It's just your bad luck that you ran into it. It's understandable to fight for the maximum benefits for yourself. Otherwise your money would be wasted. Qin Guang scratched his head. He was actually quite embarrassed. Lu Fei asked again, but how are you going to make the medicine sink? As far as I know, even if it reacted, there would still be a lot of mud. Qin Guang stretched out his right hand, and a small mud ball floated in his palm. With my magic. Didn't you say it didn't work? Aren't we thinking of a way now? Qin Guang pointed to the cup hanging on it. This cup of yours is amazing. Of course, this is my divine artifact. Liuli's faint voice sounded in his heart. Is this how you use the divine artifact? If the people of the endless realm of the gods knew that you used the Holy Grail like this, you would be hunted by the gods for billions of years. You're a disgrace to the gods. Liuli finally woke up. Qin Guang didn't dare to talk back to her. He only laughed in his heart. Hee, Sister Liuli, you're awake? I don't have a choice, do I? Are you okay? You'll know when you come in. Dear customer, when will you come to visit this shop again? Qin Guang asked. What shop? Liuli Fight Club, Bao Shuang Bao Xingtian. Qin Guang silently shook his head like a rattled drum. Even if he had 10 more guts, he wouldn't dare to go in and die. Now that he had been developed by Liuli into a human sandbag that could recover on its own, only God knew how hard she would hit him. After another 2 or 3 hours, Qin Guang saw that Lu Fei was about to fall asleep, so he asked for a short leave from Liuli. He drove Lu Fei to the hotel to sleep. Unfortunately, he didn't have time to be intimate with Lu Fei again. He had to rush back to the factory. He had nothing else to do but sit on the chair and watch the water drip from the cup. It was extremely boring and depressing. Actually, he didn't have to worry about losing the cup. However, Liuli didn't reason with him. She said something like, You left me here alone to do hard labor and let me dry by the side of the sewage pond. You still want to lie comfortably in the hotel room and pick up girls? Are you tired of living? Originally, when he kicked the Holy Grail into the pond, Qin Guang had gotten into trouble. Now that he was faced with Liuli's unreasonable behavior, he could only admit defeat. Although this matter had arisen because of Lori, there was no reason to reason with a woman, let alone a goddess. Fortunately, Lu Fei was considerate and didn't argue with him. From the next morning, trucks drove into the Tangshan Industrial Park sewage treatment plant under the watchful eyes of the public. There were only 2 days before the final trial team arrived. Unknowingly, more and more people were staring at the Tangshan Industrial Park. Qin Guang's purchase of such a large amount of medicine this time had to attract attention. A depressing atmosphere enveloped the entire Tangshan officialdom. Now, basically all the current managers in this place knew who the new boss of Xiaoguang Environmental Protection was. He was a powder keg that no one could afford to offend. Not only was Qin Guang distressed, but the local government of Tangshan was even more distressed than him. If it was just a small figure, a small boss, his money would go down the drain. At most, the local government would express sympathy, regret, and helplessness. Then, they would quietly use the matter as a topic of conversation after a meal. But this time the person who was trapped was Chen Guang. He was not an ordinary person. He was a civil aviation hero, a contemporary internet celebrity, and an old leader of a special ultra-high-end department. He had recently caused a major earthquake in Kainan province's officialdom with a slap. Chen Guang was annoyed by himself, but the people of Tangshan City were not annoyed by him. They were afraid of him. If time could be reversed and they could start over, they would never watch Xiaoguang Environmental Protection get away just like that. Although everyone was very happy at the time and felt that everyone was happy, thanking the mysterious tycoon for solving many of Tangshan City's long-standing problems. Without the money sent by this fool, God knew how many pieces of meat Boss Xia would have to cut to fill the financial hole accumulated by the industrial factory for 8 years. But now, they knew that it was hard to say whether the mysterious tycoon was stupid or not, but he was definitely not someone to be trifled with. But now, even if they caught Boss Xia who had already run away, it would be useless. He had repaid countless loans before, and 170 million yuan had long been scattered to countless places. It was impossible to get the money back. If it wasn't for the fear of getting into trouble again, some of the hidden rich in Tangshan City's local officialdom would have wanted everyone to raise money from their own pockets to send away the god of plague, Chen Guang. They could really come up with so much money, but they didn't dare to. In the small office of the municipal committee, a few people related to this matter, as well as the people in charge of the overall situation, were sitting together and sighing. The scene was very grim. Xiaopeng, you did a good job before. If it were someone else in your situation, they wouldn't have said such words. The middle-aged man sitting in the main seat first praised Deputy Chief Pang. Deputy Chief Pang shook his big belly and sighed. It's considered a fight to the death for me. I gave the emperor a death remonstrance, but now it seems that it's still useless. He arranged for people to buy drugs. Actually, if he really wanted to suppress the task, someone else would have to take it. But what was the use of that? Chen Guang had even bought the drugs. That meant he had made up his mind. He would not turn back until he hit the wall. He took out his phone dejectedly. Never mind. I'll call the higher-ups and ask for help. These people were not at the level where they could communicate with him on equal terms, but there should be someone who was friends with him. He could get someone to persuade him as a friend, right? Chapter 1024. News of Tangshan factory purchasing large amounts of medicine within a short period of time had similarly reached another person's desk. In the senior director's office of Tiansong Water Company, Song Ningyuan was flipping through a report in boredom. While he had already become one of the main decision-makers in this massive corporation, he actually did not know much about technology. He did not feel that he needed to learn everything either. He was the boss and only needed to manage major decisions and personnel appointments. As for other matters, it was much better to leave them to someone else rather than having to do everything himself. Just like the emperors of ancient times, no matter how concerned they were about the people's livelihood, there was no need for them to learn how to transplant rice. The phone on his desk rang. Picking it up, it was the exceptionally sweet voice of a secretary. Mr. Song, Manager Xie is back and wants to see you. Song Ningyuan grunted in acknowledgement. All right, let him in. He did not really like being called Manager Song. After entering, Xie rubbed his hands rather nervously. How is the matter with Xia Guang and Tangshan factory? Have they already started dismantling it? Song Ningyuan looked up at Xie. Xie smiled awkwardly. Song? Mr. Song, not yet. What happened? Song Ningyuan was not in a hurry to blame Xie. He understood the abilities of this capable subordinate of his. If he had not succeeded, something must have happened. Xie hurriedly explained. After a long time he concluded, that's how it was. I had not thought that the person who bought Xia Guang would be Chen Guang. His attitude was extremely vile at the time, not taking our Tiansong company seriously at all, repeatedly telling me to scram in front of everyone in the meeting room. Old Zhou of the construction team was about to flip out. Luckily I managed to hold him back. Song Ningyuan nodded. You did well. You must not make a move against him. But why didn't you report this to me yesterday? Xie said in a vexed tone. Actually, I was planning on going to MT Tangshan again today to reason with him, but I just heard some news. That Chen Guang had Guoming purchase large amounts of medicine. It looks like he intends to use medicine to bluff his way through this time. So I thought that it would be useless to go look for him in my capacity, and so I hurried back. Mr. Song, this. Song Ningyuan rubbed his eyebrows. Take a break first. I'll think about this. After Xie walked out, Song Ningyuan burst into laughter. He was not anxious at all. Instead, he felt indescribably pleased. After such a long time, he had heard a lot about Qin Guang. No matter how stupid he was, he knew that Tang Ying had only used Qin Guang as a shield. He knew that Qin Guang and Tang Ying didn't have that kind of relationship. However, things had changed. Although he had lost a little face because of what happened back then, he had already changed his target and no longer cared about Tang Ying. Moreover, Qin Guang's status had risen too quickly. Even if Song Ningyuan bore a grudge against him, he would not take the initiative to provoke him again. However, he had never imagined that he would have to deal with Qin Guang again. Song Ningyuan had personally negotiated the deal for the Tongshan Industrial Factory, so he was determined to get it. Although he knew that the lucky boss Xia had found a scapegoat, he didn't think much of it. Everything was done according to the rules. If the factory didn't meet the standards in 8 years, even the gods couldn't save it. Now he suddenly realized that the scapegoat was actually an old acquaintance. Although Qin Guang wasn't the same as before, Song Ningyuan didn't think that Qin Guang's struggles could cause any trouble for him. Are you kidding me? Do you think environmental protection is like running a house? You think you can pass the test by adding drugs? Do you think I don't know how to find someone else? Do you dare to add drugs in front of the review team? I'll secretly take a photo of you and expose it to the internet. No matter how good you are, you'll have to admit it. It's really like wearing out iron shoes and fruitless searching, only to find it by chance. I was just wondering how I could teach you a lesson, and now you've run into my trap. Don't blame me for making fun of you. I might not be able to do anything to you in other fields, but environmental protection? I'm sorry, but that's my home field. Song Ningyuan called Xie first. Try to see if you can bribe 2 employees in the Tongshan Industrial Factory. It's best if you can take a photo or video of them administering the drugs. Xie immediately shook his head. I'm afraid that'll be difficult. I heard that Qin Guang is guarding the factory 24/7. Also, he has chased out the employees who didn't get along with him. There's too little time and it's hard to find someone reliable to interact with. Song Ningyuan waved his hand. Do you have any other ideas? He won't be able to pass even if he adds drugs. Xie rolled his eyes. Mr. Song, we have our own people in the review team. We can get them to extend the sampling time to a week, and then take samples at random locations and times throughout the factory. Even if Qin Guang adds drugs, he can't possibly control it for a week, right? There's bound to be a loophole, right? Also, if we let others take photos, Qin Guang might find fault with us, but the review team can brazenly patrol and take photos. If he dares to stop us, we'll promote it online. Song Ningyuan snapped his fingers. Let's do that. Meanwhile, Qin Guang had been sitting in the factory for an entire day. In order to make it comfortable for him, Guoming had even ordered someone to move his office chair to the water intake and set up a table for Qin Guang so that he could put his laptop on it. Old Master Guang was sitting on pins and needles, but Liuli wouldn't let him leave, so he couldn't leave either. Fortunately, his skills were so strong that he wouldn't catch a cold even if he was exposed to the cold wind for an entire day. Everything else was fine except that he felt a little silly sitting in the open all by himself. However, he couldn't explain his intentions to others. Fortunately, Guoming helped him smooth things over by putting up banners all over the factory. Work hard for 3 days, live and die with Tongshan Industrial Factory. Fill in the gaps and leave no regrets. Do a good job of every detail. Live and die as a member of Tongshan Industrial Factory. This time, the remaining 30 or so employees in the factory understood that the boss was sitting at the water intake to show his determination and boost morale. He wanted everyone to move and think of every way possible to save the factory. More than a day passed. Even though there were constantly large trucks hauling medicine into Tongshan Industrial Factory, the 30 or so employees were working hard. The medicine that had been hauled in was like a mountain, and they were all placed in predetermined positions according to Guoming's instructions. Even the boss wasn't afraid of the cold or fatigue. He personally sat there to monitor the data, so how could the employees be lazy? Qin Guang put his hands in his pockets and stared listlessly at the novel on the computer screen. He then looked at the employees running up and down in the distance, working hard. If Liuli hadn't stopped him from moving, he would have helped carry the bags. The situation was really awkward. When the sky was about to turn dark, he received an unexpected call. It was from old Master Jean. He didn't expect that such a small matter would reach the ears of the old masters. The old master had specially called to persuade him to let go. Not only that, the old master even promised that he would think of a way to compensate him in other ways. He guaranteed that he wouldn't suffer a loss of 170 million yuan. However, Qin Guang was already in a difficult position. He had encouraged the other people in the factory and had already been sitting here for an entire day. He didn't want Song Ningyuan to take advantage of him for nothing, so how could he let it go just like that? This was no longer a matter of money. This was a matter of thinking. This was a matter of face. Face was more important than the heavens. I'm taking this matter so seriously. If I give up without achieving some results, wouldn't it be a huge stain on my perfect life? Therefore, no matter how old Master Jin tempted him, he wouldn't waver. Later on, old Master Jin talked about the righteousness of the millions of people in Tangshan City. Qin Guang also gave him a promise. Although he seemed to be stubborn and wanted to cause trouble, he actually had confidence and plans. He promised that the people wouldn't suffer a loss. At most, he would cooperate with the water company of the Lu Chemical Company to increase investment and rebuild the Tangshan industrial factory. I definitely won't do worse than Tiansong. I'll also return this place to a great place within half a year. Old Master Jin saw that he couldn't persuade him, so he couldn't do anything about it. The old man decided to call the leader of the review team to reassure him. This was what the old master said. Don't give Qin Guang face. Just investigate to the death. The stricter the better, but don't be unreasonable with Qin Guang. You have to reason with him about everything. You have to use the righteousness of the environmentalists. Don't let him feel that you are deliberately making things difficult for him. Instead, let him feel that as environmentalists, you are being strict because of your responsibility and responsibility. Didn't he add medicine? Even if you let him add medicine, he won't be able to pass the test. Let him and his Xia Guang environmental protection die quickly. Don't let him get involved in this matter again. If he flips out and gets angry, it doesn't matter. Bring me out, bring Wuxian out, and I'll personally take care of it. This kid is very favored here, but we don't nurture princelings. What we nurture are the pillars of our society. This isn't his specialty. The sooner you make him give up, the sooner I can pull him back to the right path. After a long time, before Qin Guang had time to use his relationship with Zenith Star had already started to undermine him. Actually, old Master Jin couldn't be blamed. He was also kind. He didn't want him to waste time and energy in Tangshan City, and even promised to compensate him. The old master felt that he was a child throwing a tantrum and messing around. Qin Guang's treatment was unique in the world. Time flew. After Qin Guang sat at the water intake of the Tangshan industrial factory with amazing perseverance for 2 days and 2 nights, the central review team was finally about to arrive. Last night, Qin Guang had already ordered the entire Tangshan industrial factory to put all kinds of drugs and additives into the pool 1 night in advance according to the sewage treatment process. The final trial of the sewage treatment plant in Tangshan Industrial Park was about to begin. A long motorcade drove in from the gate of the factory. Under the cheering of old Master Jin, the review team was particularly motivated. They even temporarily expanded the team. There were 3 minibuses and 1 bus. The minibus was loaded with people, and the minibus was loaded with equipment. The review team only had one purpose: to continuously take random samples to ensure that Qin Guang didn't have any loopholes. They wanted to kill him. Chapter 1025. When the motorcade entered the gate, Guoming, Hualing, and Zhongyu were standing next to Qin Guang. Lu Fei was looking around the pond and clicking her tongue from time to time. The medicine was put in last night, and the reaction was almost complete by now. Before the sun rose, Hualing and Zhongyu tested the main indicators such as CODCR, total phosphorus, and ammonia nitrogen. The concentration of soluble pollutants in these water bodies had dropped to a level that met the requirements. In addition, during the whole process of adding the drug, the amount of drug in each section was accurate to the gram. In the end, the test results of the various sections were perfect. Basically, they were very close to the original design parameters. Of course, this was the ideal conditions that disregarded the super difficult to deal with components, and the biggest technical difficulty of classification and pretreatment. For example, the chemical oxygen demand in the anaerobic pond, which was the concentration of CODCR, was 6,000 mg per liter. After the drug was added to the second anaerobic pond, the concentration of the effluent directly dropped to 1,500 mg per liter. The COD removal rate of the UASB anaerobic process reached 75%, which was just reasonable. The subsequent 2-stage aerobic process was also strictly according to this ratio, and finally the effluent concentration was controlled at around 400 milligrams per liter, and the removal rate of the two-stage aerobic process was maintained at around 50%. The large capacity of the effluent stabilization pond was also put in drugs to ensure that the COD concentration in the entire pond was around 400 milligrams per liter, and it was seamlessly connected with the effluent of the previous process. In the entire wastewater treatment plant, each function group was strictly advancing according to this pollutant removal rate ladder. Even if it was a fraud, it was still a very high-end fraud. Without very professional calculations and accurate tests, it couldn't even be faked. With the technical ability of the previous staff of the Tangshan plant, it was impossible. Fortunately, there were two top students from Gokyo University, Hualing and Zhongyu. The two of them followed Zhuojingxi to conduct photocatalysis-related research in the school's laboratory. In the past, the two of them had to do precise research to at least 4 decimal places. With Professor Xu escorting them, the equipment they brought here was almost all good goods directly from the National Photocatalyst Laboratory of Gokyo University. Even the pipette guns they used were imported. They were many times better than ordinary local laboratories. They were even better than the ones brought by the Central Review team. It was because of Hualing and Zhongyu's continuous and precise tests that they were able to understand the situation of the pollutants in the major functional groups like the back of their hands. Similarly, Hualing and Zhongyu had also put in a lot of effort in the calculation of the dosage. This was also a very meticulous and complicated work. Qin Guang could do it himself, but he was lazy. He was also very bad at doing experiments. No matter how much of a genius he couldn't know everything that he hadn't learned. Of course, Guoming couldn't relax at all, and Hualing and Zhongyu were also full of melancholy. The reason was very simple. Although the soluble pollutants could meet the standard, the floating mud floating on the water surface like a floating island was too eye-catching. This was especially so during the two-stage aerobic treatment process. As the aerator below continued to aerate, the bubbles in the pool rose up along with the mud. It looked like moldy congee with century eggs and lean meat that was boiling. Although it was not uncommon to force the standard by using drugs to meet the standard in China, it couldn't be a pool full of floating mud, right? With this kind of operation there was no need to test it. They could just take a picture and post it on the internet on the spot. It would be dead in minutes. It was said that one was deceiving oneself while stealing a bell, but one couldn't poke the eyes of others. Guoming looked at Qin Guang awkwardly, then looked back at the pool in front of him. "Sai, there's too much mud. It's impossible to fish it all out. There's too much mud in the entire factory." Hualing wanted to laugh but she couldn't. She patted on Qin Guang's shoulder and continued, "Look, I told you yesterday that it's useless to add medicine, and you insisted on me calculating it. You've really tired me and Zhongyu." Zhongyu also frowned. In the past, Hualing and I also represented the school to help the provincial department do a similar investigation. When the time comes, they will definitely take photos and video evidence, then use a large number of tubes to take samples of the mud and water in the pool. It won't pass. Guoming said again, "That's right. When the time comes, we might be criticized by the whole country again. Although Tangshan factory has been criticized at least 20 to 30 times, Boss Xia used to be the scapegoat. Now it's you, Qin Guang." Lu Fei ran down the stairs with her hands clasped. Unlike the others who were sighing, she looked at Qin Guang excitedly and urged, "Hurry up, hurry up." Qin Guang, who had been sitting on the chair with his eyes closed, finally opened his eyes. He stood up and smiled at Guoming and the others. "Don't panic. Everyone don't panic." "How can we not panic? They will be here in a minute." Guoming was so anxious that he jumped up and down. Hualing and Zhongyu were confused by his inexplicable calmness. They felt that something was wrong. They looked at Lu Fei, who was eager to try, and they were even more confused. Hualing quietly moved next to Lu Fei. "Sister Fei, does Qin Guang still have some trump card?" Zhongyu also pricked up her ears. She wanted to hear a legend. Lu Fei laughed. "I can't say, but I can promise you that you will soon witness a miracle." At this moment an employee ran over from afar. "Chief Qin. Manager Gua. They are here. The inspection team's convoy has entered our factory." Guoming was shocked. His dark skin instantly turned pale. We're doomed." Qin Guang suddenly waved his hand. "Hey everyone, get ready. It's time to witness a miracle." At the same time, Guoming wanted to go to the entrance to receive Qin Guang. At the same time he wanted to know what Qin Guang was trying to do. If Qin Guang wasn't the boss, he would have slapped him in the face by now. While Guoming was still in a daze, Lu Fei had already run to the anaerobic pool and clapped her hands excitedly. It's going down. It's going down. Awesome. What? Hua Ling was still standing next to Qin Guang. She asked from afar. Lu Fei waved her hand. You will understand when you see it. Qin Guang stood there with a smile. He looked like an expert. Seeing that Qin Guang wasn't going to explain himself, Guoming immediately ran towards the anaerobic pool. Hua Ling and Zhong Yu also glared at Qin Guang before they ran towards Lu Fei. When the three of them finally reached the pool, they realized something was wrong. The sludge floating on the surface of the anaerobic pool, which looked like a bird's eye view of the Thousand Island Lake, was long gone. There is another piece. It's sinking. Zhong Yu pointed to the corner of the square pool. What's going on? Guoming had been working at Tongshan factory for half a year, but he had never seen anything like this. There was no special reason for the floating mud to sink. Hua Ling shook her head. I don't know. Lu Fei shouted at the side of the anaerobic pool. She turned around and waved at everyone. Come over here. We can still see something. The three of them ran towards the oxygenation pool again, just in time to catch up with the last batch of sludge that was sinking. The sludge that was bubbling up like boiling porridge had now all gathered together and turned into blocks of rock that were sinking at an extremely fast speed. The people standing by the pool could even hear the thumping sounds coming from the bottom of the pool. It sounded like someone was throwing bricks into it. After a few seconds, the anaerobic pool, which had been boiling due to the aeration, gradually became much brighter. The few of them continued to look down the section. The water in the sedimentation pool was also brightly lit, and the stabilizing pond at the end was as green and translucent as a river. The mud was all gone. Guoming didn't understand what was happening. It was completely different from the popular science education he had been exposed to. But he didn't have time to ask Qin Guang for an answer. He quickly excused himself and went straight to the office building. Hua Ling and Zhong Yu returned to Qin Guang's side. Why is this happening? The mud inexplicably congealed together and sank down like bricks. Hua Ling waved her hands and said. Zhong Yu also stared at Qin Guang with wide eyes. Qin Guang crossed his legs and sat back on the swivel chair. You don't understand. This is God's will. God's will? Hua Ling and Zhong Yu were both confused. Qin Guang nodded heavily. Yes, this is God's will. It's God's guidance. In fact, I've already expected this. According to my precise calculations, after 8 hours of reaction, the drug we put in will produce a chelate structure that you can't understand with your knowledge. I've calculated with my fingers, and now it's time for these flocculation structures to be fully unleashed. So? Hua Ling felt that he was talking nonsense. Qin Guang grinned again. It's like a spring. You keep stretching the spring, and when you loosen your hand, it will retract with a hum. When the van der Waals force between the molecules, the molecular chain force, or any other kind of stress exceeds the limit, it will be instantly released. This will cause the originally scattered mud to be instantly absorbed, forming an insoluble precipitate, and then hardening at the bottom of the pool. It's fake. Zhong Yu still didn't believe it. Qin Guang spread his hands. Is your guess more real, or is it the truth with your own eyes? Hua Ling asked. Then how do you know this will happen? Have you forgotten who I am? Who? I'm an almighty Superman. You don't know the terrifying computing power in my brain. It's also because I don't want to compete for the Nobel Prize. Otherwise, it will be me every year and the Nobel Prize will be renamed to Qin Guang Prize. Anyway, everything is under my control. Okay, you guys go rest and wait for my good news. Qin Guang closed his eyes again. He had an expression that said, summer insects can't talk about ice. This time Hua Ling and Zhong Yu had to believe it even if they didn't want to. Although it was unbelievable, as Qin Guang said, seeing is believing. In the wonderful world of chemistry, this was actually not impossible. For example, adding the right amount of sodium hydroxide to the copper sulfate solution could instantly form a flocculent precipitate, and the indigo solution would instantly become colorless. The two girls, whose minds were full of question marks, used this phenomenon to convince themselves as they returned to the factory dormitory. Perhaps the reaction process in the sewage pool was particularly complicated and had exceeded their understanding, but Qin Guang's explanation was always correct. You can't compare people to each other. Hua Ling sighed. Zhong Yu also nodded. It's just that his brain is so powerful. It's a pity that he didn't come to work with us on photocatalysis. If he had a breakthrough, Teacher Zhua and Teacher Shu would be smiling even if they fell asleep, right? He's a genius. The thinking of a genius is always something we can't understand. Lu Fei sat next to Qin Guang and patted his shoulder. Shameless. You obviously used magic to cheat and you still have the face to talk about the Nobel Prize. Why don't you go to heaven? Qin Guang coughed. Sister Lu Fei, don't touch me. Don't look at how relaxed I look right now. I'm just pretending. More than 100,000 cubic meters of sewage is really not a joke. The resulting sludge is hundreds of tons. I even used up my Earth Elemental MP. MP? It's mana. You don't know how much mana it burns. I didn't even use any endurance equipment. Do you need me to give you a mana buff? Sure. Bring me a big mana potion while you're at it. Okay. I have to meditate to recover my mana. Help me keep an eye on me. Don't let anyone disturb me. Qin Guang really didn't talk nonsense with Lu Fei. At this moment, his earth burner ability completely covered the entire sewage treatment plant. At the same time, it solidified the sludge in more than 100,000 cubic meters of sewage to the bottom of the pool. This consumed his elemental ability very quickly. Moreover, this was not an instantaneous release. It required continuous support from the ability. He was fighting against the diffusion of nanoscale molecules. The difficulty was not enough to explain to others. On the other side, Guoming rushed back to the office building in time to meet with the experts and leaders of the review team. The boss, Qin Guang, did not personally welcome the review team. This made the people in the review team feel uneasy, but they did not say anything. Although everyone now knew that he was the boss of Xiaoguang Environmental Protection and the person behind the scenes of Tongshan Industrial Sewage Treatment Plant, Guoming was currently the general manager of Xiaoguang Environmental Protection on the surface. He had full authorization from Qin Guang and could represent him in all matters within Xiaoguang Environmental Protection. Just like when others came to Microsoft to discuss business, it was already the highest level of courtesy for Microsoft to send their CEO. There was no reason to let founder Bill Gates do all the work. However, everyone knew that Qin Guang, who wanted to review Tongshan Industrial Sewage Treatment Plant, was a topic that couldn't be avoided. After the review team leader, Expert Li, got out of the car and instructed others to arrange the equipment and instruments. He went straight to the conference room accompanied by Guoming. On the way, Expert Li asked tentatively, "Is Mr. Qin in the plant today?" Guoming did not intend to hide it from him. Soon this group of people would meet Qin Guang at the water inlet. He pretended to be very distressed. Mr. Qin is at the water inlet. He has been sitting there for 2 days and 2 nights. He refused to come down no matter what we said. We couldn't persuade him. Chapter 1026. Expert Li was stunned. Qin Guang's attitude was so firm. You are a billionaire boss sitting in the open air of your own factory. Don't you think it stinks? Aren't you clearly telling everyone that you want to live and die with Tongshan Factory? If it weren't for old Master Jin's phone call and instructions, Expert Li almost wanted to turn around and leave. When the gods fight, the mortals suffer. Although he was regarded as a big shot in the domestic environmental science field, much higher than Su Lijing in the economics field, and had many friends in the political and academic circles, he was still unwilling to confront the real privileged class. Fortunately, Su Tao had heard that Qin Guang was an upright person. Although Qin Guang was rude and unreasonable, he was still a reasonable person. In any case, Su Tao might be here to grab hold of Qin Guang's weakness, but as long as he followed Old Man Jin's instructions and communicated with Qin Guang as a senior in the academic world, Qin Guang wouldn't act recklessly. If he had known this would happen, he would have kidnapped Dean Han of his school, Jinhuan College. They were all his family, so it would be easier to talk. Thinking of the encounter with Dean Han of Gokyo University last night, Comrade Li was also angry. Back then, you were my disciple after all, yet you shamelessly talked about all sorts of things and refused to show up even if you were beaten to death. You wanted to torture your teacher, me, to make me suffer. However, Dean Han also gave Comrade Li a reassuring injection. That was, although Qin Guang was young and stubborn, he still respected the elderly, especially the older generation who were knowledgeable and virtuous. Teacher Li, I didn't mean to give up. It's just that I just took over the Jinhuan College and can't leave. How about this? If we really make trouble, I will immediately rush down from Wujing, okay? I will arrive in 2 hours at most. At that time, I will bring Qin Guang to apologize to you. You are my teacher, he will definitely give you face. Dean Han patted his chest and promised. Before the on-site inspection and sampling, the review team and the existing employees of Tongshan Industrial Factory led by Guoming naturally had a meeting. At the meeting, the two sides showed their cards and publicly exchanged the conclusions drawn from the previous inspections. The purpose and significance of this review was not to deliberately make things difficult for anyone, but to solve the long-standing problem of Tangshan Industrial Factory not meeting the standards. If they continued to fail to meet the standards, the business qualification of Xiaoguang Environmental Protection would be revoked. Rome wasn't built in a day and no one was targeting anyone else. Xiaoguang Environmental Protection and Tangshan Industrial Factory had walked step by step to where they were today. Everyone was sad and regretful, but there was nothing they could do. Environmental protection had never been a profit-oriented thing. They must have a sense of social responsibility and shoulder the burden. If the operation did not meet the standards and caused harm to Tangshan City, they should be punished. On the contrary, if you do well, policy subsidies and local rewards will certainly not be lacking. Meritorious service would be rewarded and mistakes would be punished. This was the main theme of environmental protection policies in recent years, and no one was an exception. Alright, the 43rd Compliance Review of the Tangshan Industrial Park Sewage Treatment Plant operated by Xiaoguang Environmental Protection Company, Limited has officially begun. Samples will be taken at random times and sections. The theoretical pollutant removal rate of each section will be calculated reasonably. The review process will follow the 3 principles of fairness, impartiality and openness. All employees of Tangshan Industrial Factory, please fully cooperate with the review in the next 7 days. With a wave of Expert Li's hand, the members of the review team in the conference room stood up and announced the official start of the review. Guoming was stunned at first, then his face changed slightly. Expert Li, didn't the previous review only last 2 days? This is... Comrade Li smiled honestly and patted Guoming on the shoulder. Manager Gua, it's like this. If your factory can meet the standards, there's no difference between 2 days and 7 days. After all, Xiaoguang Environmental Protection's operating rights are only 4 months. If they can't pass the review this time, it's equivalent to the golden ball overtime in a football game, suddenly dying. Extending to 7 days is also out of a responsible attitude for your company. Manager Gua, please cooperate. Guoming's mouth twitched and he was already cursing in his heart. Uncle Ball wants you to be responsible. Can't you leave after 1 day of sampling? Guoming's heart was filled with unspeakable worry. Although the sludge in the pond inexplicably sank before coming, making the entire sewage treatment station's current operating state look perfect. But he also knew that adding medicine, after all, would not solve the root cause. After a long time, the sunken sludge would sooner or later rise again. There was still a steady stream of wastewater from other factories in the industrial park, which would cause the concentration of pollutants in the entire pond to continue to rise. Especially the heavy metal ions, although by adding sulfuric acid and then a comprehensive reaction, most of the heavy metal ions became precipitates, but after a long time, they would still follow the process to the subsequent stages. But even if he was cursing in his heart, he couldn't show any difference on his face. He could only laugh and say that he would cooperate with the work of the expert leaders. The review team headed by Expert Li, with dozens of people up and down, immediately set off with a variety of instruments to various parts of the Tangshan industrial plant. Except for Hua Ling and Zhong Yu's laboratory with the sign Gokyo University Photocatalyst Tangshan Industrial Plant Laboratory, all the other laboratories were also seized by the technicians who came with the review team. The background of these technicians was also not small. They were led by a senior laboratory member of the ministry's review team, and they were composed of capable personnel from the Dachuan Provincial Department and the Prefectural Environmental Monitoring Stations. Comrade Old Li, with his hands behind his back, followed by a dense group of people, went straight to the pond. Before sampling and testing, on-site visits were the first step of the work. Old Li used a reverse process visit method. In short, it was to push from the water outlet all the way to the water inlet. Manager Gua, your water is a bit clear. Comrade Old Li stood at the water outlet with a confused face, thinking that his eyes were playing tricks on him. Although he already knew that Qin Guang had ordered Tangshan Industrial Plant to pour drugs crazily before he came here, he couldn't point out the other party's real evidence. He was in a particularly awkward situation. He knew that the other party had poured drugs, but because of Qin Guang he couldn't say it. He could only think of ways to catch him from other places. Because Qin Guang was the one who gave the order to pour the drugs, no matter how nice old Master Jin's words were, he couldn't slap Qin Guang in the face. This was self-evident. However, he didn't take Qin Guang's matter seriously. He had dealt with such factories, if not 1,000, at least 800. No matter how good the drug was, the mud in the pond couldn't run away. I'll take photos and videos at the scene for evidence, and then drag you along to take samples. When the evidence is conclusive, I'm not afraid of you denying it. But even if you beat him to death, he would never have thought that the scene would be like this. I'm really seeing a ghost. I know that you guys pour drugs, but why is your water so clear? Guoming's surprise was no better than Comrade Old Li's. He had just seen the water outlet about 20 minutes ago. At that time, because there was too much floating mud in the stabilization pond of the previous section, the discharged water from the water outlet looked no different from the color of instant coffee. It was miserable. But now, if he didn't know that this was a sewage outlet, he would have taken a cup and scooped up a spoonful to taste it. On the other side, the employees of the Tangshan factory who accompanied them were afraid of causing a commotion. These employees blinked their eyes, wondering if they were still dreaming, or if they had lived so many years in vain. Is this still the Tangshan industrial factory where I have worked for 8 years? Why does this water look so sci-fi? Suddenly, Comrade Oldly asked. Fortunately, before coming here, Guoming had already learned a little bit from Qin Guang. He could only bite the bullet and proudly said, "Of course, that's for sure." After 3 months of process improvement and operation debugging, the operation of our factory is now very stable. Manager Gui, you guys, could it be that you secretly sent the wastewater underground and connected a water pipe to the outlet? The scene in front of him was too strange. Comrade Oldly couldn't help but ask this rebellious question, even if he offended Qin Guang. Guoming immediately jumped up and said, "Expertly, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. The water situation of our factory can be checked. We can't fake things like using clean water to replace sewage water. Or you can install a flow meter here and another flow meter at the water inlet. You can check our water balance. I'll drink 1 drop more and I'll take a drop less." Seeing that Guoming was so resolute, Expertly quickly tried to smooth things over. "Manager Gua, I'm just joking. Don't take it seriously." He thought to himself, what the hell? You guys don't do clean water to sewage water, but you guys can't do it either. But the problem is, where is your medicine? Where is the precipitation? The law of conservation of matter? The lid of Lavoisier's coffin can't be closed anymore. With this doubt in mind, Expert Li and the experts of the review team walked from the water outlet to the water inlet. Along the way, many experts almost began to doubt their lives. They knew that they must have put in the medicine, but there was no precipitation at all. This magic was even more ridiculous than turning a living person into a living person. Finally, everyone saw Qin Guang, who was still sitting there in a meditative state. Expertly wanted to go up and say hello to Qin Guang, but Lu Fei's eyes drifted away. The 2 burly security guards she brought with her blocked the way. "This is Professor Li from the University of Science and Technology of China?" Lu Fei greeted him with a smile. Expertly was stunned. He felt that this beautiful girl in a leather jacket looked familiar, but he couldn't remember her name. Lu Fei took out a business card from her pocket and handed it to Expert Li. "Professor Li, you're forgetful. I'm Lu Fei, the daughter of Lu Jiachuan from Lu Chemical. A few years ago, when my father had a meal with Professor Li, I had the honor of sitting at the same table and greeting the elders." Old Li's expression brightened. "Little Lu's daughter, no wonder you look familiar." The only daughter of Lu Jiachuan, the chairman of Lu Chemical, was not a small figure in the country. But it was a little strange. Why would she appear at Tangshan factory at this time? Old Li's eyes still drifted to Qin Guang's direction. "That's Qin Guang, right?" Lu Fei gestured for him to keep quiet. "It's him. But Professor Li, to tell you the truth, I'm a friend of Qin Guang's. That brat has a strange temperament and he just has to be stubborn. He's been sitting here for 2 days and 2 nights, and no one can persuade him to leave. He says that he's here to pray for the Tangshan factory, and that no one is to disturb him. But he's just a decoration. Professor Li, ignore him. Interrogate him however you want and follow the rules. Don't worry. Although he has a violent temper, he's actually reasonable. I'll watch over him and promise not to cause trouble for your investigation, okay?" Qin Guang was acting strangely and Lu Fei was here to stop him. Expert Li and the others couldn't figure out what Qin Guang was up to, but they couldn't easily offend him. Therefore, everyone tacitly ignored him, who had inexplicably moved a chair to sit in the open, and continued to visit other places on the spot. Anyway, Qin Guang was sitting there and he couldn't suck the pollutants into his stomach. They could just treat him as a decoration in the sewage treatment plant, and it wouldn't affect the investigation. But when Old Li turned around, he kept cursing in his heart. "I wish you a heavy rain tonight." When they were far away, Lu Fei returned to Qin Guang's side with a stiff expression. "What's wrong?" Qin Guang looked up slightly. "What's going on?" Lu Fei smiled bitterly. "Your manager Gu just whispered something to me." What is it? Lu Fei sighed. The investigation will last for a week, random time, random location, random sampling. Hearing those words, Qin Guang nearly vomited blood. What a scam. He had been here for less than an hour. Even if he had been desperately searching for the Earth element power in the outside world, the Earth explosion's elemental power reserve was still in short supply, and he had consumed about 30% to 40% of it. According to his original calculation, if he saved some money and had a stronger endurance, it shouldn't be a problem for him to last 2 days. But it was certainly not easy. He had never continuously consumed his supernatural ability for such a long time. It could be said to be a double torture to his body and spirit. It was like a never-tired machine. After running for a long time, it always had to be stopped for maintenance and lubrication. Qin Guang was a little tired now, but he felt that with his willpower and the strongest body in history, he wouldn't be exhausted for another 48 hours. But now the investigation suddenly changed to 7 days, which was obviously bad news. Qin Guang silently looked up at the sky, thinking to himself, in the end, it's the sun who was stupid enough to mess with me. Somewhere, Jin Shiyue's father, who was reading documents, suddenly moved his butt. Strange, he felt a little constipated. Before he knew it, a day had passed. The inspection team settled down in the factory. Sampling, testing, photographing, videotaping, visiting, checking, none of these procedures were left behind. In order to ensure the principle of fairness and impartiality, he even borrowed a law enforcement recorder to follow every step of his. He was determined not to leave any traces. Everything looked so calm and normal. The investigation this time was no different from many in the past. But there was something different because everyone who passed by Qin Guang, whether it was the investigation team or the employees of the Tangshan factory, felt very strange. Just how good was the feng shui of this pit? This master had been sitting here for 3 days and 2 nights. The employees of the Tangshan factory thought, could this be the dragon's lair in our blessed land? Chief Qin personally suppressed the dragon's vein? So all the mud has sunk? Amazing. Chapter 1027. The first day passed, and the 24-hour monitoring data was placed in front of the leaders of the review team. Of course, there were no problems with the data. It was as perfect as a textbook. The employees of the Tangshan industrial factory were also exceptionally enthusiastic. Although they did not know what happened, perhaps the dragon among men, Xiao Qin, had really stabilized the factory's luck. In short, the first day passed without any mishap. Even if everyone knew that they had indeed added drugs from the situation in the pool, they felt that they might have added fake drugs. How could the operation of the factory be so perfect? The scariest scam in the world was that even the people who had personally added the drugs into the pool began to doubt their memory. The abnormal situation at the Tangshan industrial factory had also spread to the ears of many people who were paying attention to this matter. As a core member of the Central Think Tank's advisory group, Old Li, who was having a headache, even called Old Master Jean again. Old Master Jean picked up the phone and thought that there was a conflict between Old Li and Qin Guang, so he started to comfort him. Professor Li, did you catch that kid's weakness? Was he going to make a scene? It's okay, just investigate it. I'll call him right away. No, it's not like that. Leader, things are a little different from what we expected. Old Li felt that he had betrayed his leader's trust and was extremely embarrassed. What's wrong? The operation of the factory is so perfect that I can't believe it. I can't find any evidence at all. It can't be, right? Leader, it's really like this. I've tried my best. I don't know what to do now. I feel like I've learned all these years of environmental protection for nothing. He knew that he had added drugs, but he didn't show any signs on the surface. He didn't know what kind of new additives he had used to make the sludge and sediment completely sink to the bottom of the pool, and even the aeration couldn't come up. If it's as I guessed, the additive formula they used is enough to go down in history. Leader, you know that I can't mention it. Old Master Jean did not know much about technology, but he knew that it was definitely very powerful. Is there any other way? Perhaps we can only think of a way to dig out some mud from the bottom of the pool and do a public elemental half-life test. Then, we can get the authoritative organization to verify the time of formation of the mud and then determine that they used illegal drugs to get away with it. Has this been used in the regular examinations before? Not really. Old Man Jean rejected Specialist Li's idea. Forget it then. Qin Guang will explode. Let's just follow the rules. On the other side, Song Ningyuan, who was originally waiting for good news and watching Qin Guang make a fool of himself at the Tiansong Water Group, was also sitting in his office watching the live video on the computer screen. His eyes kept blinking, thinking that either he was seeing things or there was a special effect in the video. Although I'm a second-generation rich kid who relied on my father to make a living, I've read a lot of books. You can't trick me like this, right? Did my Tiansong Water Group's spy in the investigation team become a double agent? Is this a recording of the operation of another sewage treatment plant? If it wasn't for the familiar building in the frame, Song Ningyuan would have thought that it was the Tongshan industrial factory that he had visited several times, as well as Qin Guang, who occasionally showed his face in the frame, sitting there like a local god. Song Ningyuan would have thought so. The clock on the wall unknowingly reached 12 o'clock at night. He anxiously pushed the documents on the table to vent his frustration. He initially thought that he could easily make Qin Guang suffer a huge loss, but all of a sudden his beautiful dream fell through. Although the operating rights of the Tongshan industrial plant had not been officially handed over, Song Ningyuan had already invested tens of millions of operating costs in order to operate it. If Qin Guang was easily able to get away with it in this examination, then there would be variables, and his early investment would be in vain. As the leading enterprise in the environmental protection industry in China, Tiansong Water Group rarely failed. Song Ningyuan suddenly realized that he had unknowingly become the person in a very awkward situation, and he was being outmaneuvered by Qin Guang. He frowned and said to himself, "What the hell is going on?" Other than Qin Guang, the only person who knew about it, Lu Fei, temporarily left the Tongshan industrial plant. She had other things to do and she couldn't accompany Qin Guang here all the time. After Lu Fei left, Qin Guang's situation became even more lonely. The sun rose and set and the moon rose and fell. Unknowingly, another 2 days passed. Perhaps Comrade Li's sorrowful and indignant curse was effective. This morning the sky was filled with the sound of thunder, and soon there was a heavy downpour. Fortunately, Guoming quickly asked someone to set up a canopy for Qin Guang. Although the wind would still bring raindrops to Qin Guang, it was better than nothing. "Mr. Qin, why don't you take a rest?" Seeing that Qin Guang's face was not quite right, and his lips were slightly blue, Guoming tentatively suggested. Qin Guang shook his head with some difficulty. "No, I can't go." If he left at this time, the mud that had been suppressed at the bottom of the pool like cement would all collapse and float up in an instant, and all his previous efforts would be in vain. He was a dead duck who was forced to do something beyond his abilities, and he couldn't give up halfway no matter what. Otherwise, how could he be worthy of his efforts and shamelessly pretend to be the lord of the land here? Only Qin Guang knew his hardships. In the past 2 days, his earth-burster ability had gradually been completely exhausted. Fortunately, the density of elemental power in the outside world had increased a little more in the past 2 days. In addition, as time went by, he also improved his power distribution technique bit by bit, striving to achieve a better suppression effect with less elemental power consumption. As the most high-end elemental creature even in the endless divine realm, the Earthburster's original use of ability could be called perfect, even if it only relied on instinct. But perfection was not the limit, there was still exquisite perfection above perfection. Just like a tiger, an ordinary tiger could be said to be invincible in nature, possessing instinctive perfect hunting skills. But if it was trained by a professional, combined with human intelligence, it could even let a tiger master a higher level of hunting skills that surpassed the instincts of ordinary animals. This was the case for Qin Guang at this time. He relied on his natural instinct to make his rough and perfect use of the Earthburster's ability become more scientific and exquisite perfection, just enough to achieve a balance. The mud that was suppressed at the bottom of the pool also slightly loosened from the initial hard solidification, becoming a semi-gelatinous state similar to the separation of oil and water. It sank and sank at the bottom of the pool but did not float up. The consumption of elemental power was barely enough, but what really tortured him was the double pressure on his body and will. He couldn't close his eyes for 2 days, and his body was tense for 2 consecutive days. Even if he had the strongest physique, he still felt exceptionally strained. Feeling the cold raindrops falling on his face, looking up at the newly built asbestos roof above his head, Qin Guang's heart was desolate. He felt that he was really becoming more and more like the city god in the city god temple or the earth god in the earth god temple. As the saying goes, you are caught in a cocoon of your own making, and you cannot escape from the evils you bring upon yourself. What kind of evil did I run into to have to suffer like this? Serves you right, it's your own fault for coming up with this rotten idea. Lu Li's gloating voice sounded in his heart. Qin Guang silently turned his head. I really don't want to talk to you, it's all your fault. Comrade Oldley finally found a time when there was no one to disturb or block his way, so he braced himself and ran to Qin Guang's side with an umbrella. Mr. Qin. Hello, Teacher Li, you know me? Qin Guang grunted. Sister Lu Fei introduced you to me before she left. My school's Dean Han also specially sent me a text message yesterday. You are Dean Han's teacher, so I have to respect you. Then Xiao Qin, let me ask you something. What is the matter with the mud in your pond? What? There's no such thing. How can there be mud in the pond? Qin Guang was exceptionally tired as he lied with his eyes wide open. What exactly are you after? I heard from old Jean and Yanjing that if you let go of this matter, they will find a way to compensate you in other ways. Qin Guang sighed. Teacher Li, I'm suffering in silence. I can't say anything about it, but I can guarantee you that it definitely won't be a cancer that will bring disaster to the country and the people. You guys should leave early. If Tongshan Factory really can't meet the standards, I can go back and cooperate with Lu Chemical Industry to invest more to rebuild Tongshan Factory. Teacher Li, can you guys be merciful and let Xiaoguang Environmental Protection go? Old Li didn't expect Qin Guang to come and beg him. He knew that Qin Guang's promise was extremely heavy, so he was a little moved. Alright, I'll go back and discuss with the other members of the review team. Thank you, Teacher Li. I'm a little tired, I'll take a nap first. Qin Guang closed his eyes again. After a while, Old Li walked back with a helpless expression. Many people in the review team objected. They said that we must investigate for 7 days. Our process of coming here was reported to the whole country. If we leave early, we won't be able to explain to the society. Qin Guang glanced at Old Li. He had a feeling that things were not that simple. So I forget it then. Who cares? I have to bear it no matter what. You have Zhang Liang's plan, I have the explosive power. After Old Li left, a deputy team leader of the review team came over mysteriously after a while. Hello, Director Qin. Qin Guang looked up slightly. Go ahead. Qin Guang didn't have that much respect for the other members of the review team that he was not close with. To be honest, Mr. Song Ning Yuan from Tiansong Water asked me to bring you a message. Oh? What does he mean? Qin Guang knew that there must be spies from Tiansong in the review team, and there was more than one. Otherwise, Old Li's suggestion would not have been rejected so firmly. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.